2, 1. We are live on YouTube.
Welcome, Reston community. Welcome, Reston Association members. Tonight is the meeting of the Board of Directors, the full board, a regularly scheduled meeting. And I'm looking for something other than a shot of the screen. So I'd like to call the meeting to order tonight and establish quorum. I see on my Zoom screen, Mike Collins for apartments.
Yep.
I see, all right, Aaron Webb, Tall Oaks,
Hello.
John Mooney, North Point, Bob Petrine, member at large, Karen Anton, Dogwood Hunters Woods, Tom O'Karen, member at large. Got to go to my next screen. There was Sarah for a moment. I'll get it back in a moment. And I'm looking for Ven.
I didn't see him.
Okay, so we do have quorum. So we'll move forward. Couple administrative comments. Once again, the chat room will be open for members to interact. Do not expect that the board will be responding or interact. We will be focused on our deliberations as a board. So just as a reminder, I learned in the last number of weeks that some board members didn't know that you could minimize the chat screen on your Zoom screen. So keep that in mind. That might help you stay focused. And so that's my administrative piece. Then I have some opening remarks that I'd like to share tonight. One of the topics actually came up through our listening sessions, which we finished up about a week ago. And that was outreach to our community. So I wanted to share with our association members some of the efforts that we've been doing in support of a concept that to me is near and dear to my heart. And I talked about this when I was elected, and that is that of a one Reston. Over the last few months, we've renewed our efforts to work collaboratively with our community partners and they with us. I'd like to recognize two of those efforts tonight. There's others, but we'll get to those another month. Walter Alcorn, our Hunter Mill supervisor. Not only did he include Reston Association in the community involvement on the comprehensive plan review, but also in the Campus Commons Wheelie Avenue Mobility Working Group. But his openness and support has gone further than that, where in recent member meetings with the RA leadership, for example, we've discussed the greater Reston community's access and use of RA trails and open space, and the investment that we as an association make in the maintenance and preservation of those amenities that are enjoyed by so many. We've discussed the impact of the greater community on Reston Association's watershed of lakes and streams. And I want to note his most recent outreach to our DRB as the planning for what's known as Reston Town Center North continues to move forward. Reston Community Center, Tax District number 5, which is funded by all of our RA members, as well as the greater Reston community of businesses and residents. In recent meetings, one which was held yesterday, we've revived our collaborative efforts on the programming front by exploring options for bringing our respective organizational strengths together for the benefit of the whole community. Most importantly, think of RCC as a great content provider, while RA has the outside venues by which to deliver that content into our community and programs. And that's so important. And the things that we dealt with in this last year with COVID. So benefiting from the community interest research that we both did in 2019, we did that independently. We're going to use that information upon our past record to guide our future undertakings look at that as part of our recreational facilities working group and the input that we can get from there that will help us. So while we acknowledge our unique swim lanes with RCC, we will partner to use our revenue and funding sources optimally. The second item I wanted to share with you tonight is evidence that our staff's focus on enhanced service is working for our members in the greater community. So tonight, the RA Monthly Spotlight shines on our covenants, administration, and community outreach efforts. Reston Camps continues to work closely with local entities to identify Reston youth in need of services that are subsidized through funding by events and by Friends of Reston. Through collaboration with the Fairfax County Department of Family Services, our recreation supervisor, Catherine Caffey, provided 12 bikes that were donated to us to a group of very deserving boys and girls in our community. The bikes were originally intended for the annual Reston Kids Triathlon, which unfortunately had to be canceled. We've also gotten great member feedback on a number of our covenants and DRB staff, and I want to share that with you. Of one of our newer covenants advisors, Mark Clausen once again was on point. He is knowledgeable, courteous, and prompt. He was the covenants advisor for another property I sold earlier this year, and he was equally as consistent to deserve a thank you and my appreciation. Another member wrote to us of our community outreach manager, Megan McCalzy. She provided outstanding assistance from start to finish. Her knowledge, professionalism, patience, and overall service orientation helped us to understand the approval process. We are so grateful for her assistance. And finally, our DRB manager, Lisa Heath, has been amazing. Her communication, outlining procedures is exceptional, always responds in a timely fashion. I can't express enough appreciation for her assistance. So I'd like my community to join me in publicly acknowledging our Camps and Covenants staff in their outstanding service to our association. So thank you for allowing me to share that. Cheers, thank you. All right. Moving on to the next item, approval of October 22nd regular board meeting agenda. We do have two changes to that we'd like to present. Karen, you had one you wanted to note?
No, go ahead with the changes, Julie. I'm going to speak about
the first one is that item F for assessment and finance resolution 5 for banking. The BGC has indicated they'd like, is that the one?
That is the, I'm sorry, that is the one I wanted to speak of. I thought you were talking about other corrections.
Okay, you want to continue?
Yeah, I'm moving that we defer item F, assessment and finance resolution 5, banking, to the November full board meeting. With apologies to Bach, I fully anticipated that it would be ready for this board meeting, but due to some late input from a member and from a committee member, we have a little bit more work to do, and we want to make sure that what we bring to the full board, we're all fully behind. So I beg your indulgence on that. The directive was to have something before the board this month, and I hope you'll understand that it's going to be delayed a month, but I do want to remind everybody that the other part of that directive is that while the amendments to this resolution are pending, no loans can be pursued by RA without board approval. So,
okay, so that's one item for the agenda change. The next one is that the executive session, item E, on contractual matters. We have no contractual matters, but we do have a violations matter that we would like to address in that executive session. So I'd like to replace contractual matters with violation matters. So those are the two changes to the meeting agenda for tonight. So if I might have a motion to accept those two changes, that would be great. That would be John so moved as we take
Second.
stuff up, and Karen second. Thank you very much. All in support of those two changes to our agenda tonight.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I see enough hands and a voice from Mike Collins. So that passes. Moving on to the consent calendar. Again, we have a slight change to that, which I am, we need to remove the committee volunteer appointment from consent for Mike Martin for Elections Committee. The consent calendar indicates it's a one-year appointment. It's actually a 3-year appointment. So I would like to remove that from consent and deal with that in the full agenda. And the second thing on the consent calendar was these are the ones I noted at least, there were a couple of typos or changes in the September 24th regular board meeting minutes. And one was purely administrative. Somehow we got 8:55 inserted into the agenda, and also then the other one in item P of that meeting, we actually had the phrase "to move" in twice. So it was to simply remove the first one. So those were the two changes I had noted in the consent calendar. Did anyone note anything else?
No.
So if I might have a motion to amend the consent calendar to remove Mike Martin from the consent calendar, move that to the regular calendar, and amend the typos. I would appreciate that.
So move.
Thank you, Bob.
Second.
From John Mooney, all comfortable with that change?
Aye.
I see all hands and a voice from Mike Collins. Great. So next is to adopt the consent calendar.
Madam President, can I make a brief comment?
Sure.
Just for clarification for the members on the extent of the changes in elections and referenda resolution 2 and 3. They are in resolution 2. The only substantive change was to only permit a candidate to run for one office or for one seat. So that's the substantive change in 2. And in 3, there was some clarification around the categories of candidates and the type and clarifying what is a certified candidate. So I just wanted to make it clear that those are, really the extent of the changes. This is not an attempt to, put something past the members without their knowing. It's
Correct.
really, really minor changes.
I appreciate your commentary on that, Bob. That does help certainly our membership and explain partially why we felt that these resolutions were appropriate for consent calendar.
And with that, could I move to accept the consent calendar?
That would be wonderful, Bob.
Second.
Okay, second from John. All comfortable with accepting the consent calendar as amended?
Aye.
Okay, aye. Thank you, Mike. Now we actually need to make another motion to place the committee volunteer appointment for Mike Martin on the regular agenda calendar. And I am suggesting that it be placed before the executive session, which would make it kind of like a pre-E, but after D member comments. So
Yeah.
can I make that motion? I have just made that motion, so now I want a second to that. Thank you, Karen. Are we all comfortable with that change?
Yep.
Ayes.
Aye.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, so we're good with that. Now we need to. I've gotten lost. Have we approved the consent calendar?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Member comments? Who's letting members in to comment?
Hey, Julie, we've got Liz Badley as our first hand raised.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Liz. Good to hear from
Hi, thank you guys so much. I'm Liz Badley at 11294 Silentwood Lane. And I have two comments actually. So I've been attending a lot of meetings and went to the fiscal meeting because I was really, interested in how the budget was put together and everything. So I listened to that last night, and they made a lot of great recommendations, and I was, really liked what they were doing. But one question, that I've kind of had over and over is about the communications line item in the budget. Hank presented that, 2 employees were added to work on social media, and just in a quick survey of the social media, it really doesn't seem like interaction on social media has changed. And these people were specifically hired for Facebook and Instagram from what was said. It was for social media platforms. And it doesn't look like interactions have changed much since 2016 or 2018. And I know that there have been changes to the platform, but still with 2 people focused on that, I'm kind of wondering what metrics are being used to make sure that they were not just added to take on a job that could be done in 5 minutes with anybody with a smartphone, and maybe even delegated per department. If it's just going to be getting information out there, then you don't need a full-time employee to make an Instagram post. You just take your phone, snap a picture, write up some copies, snap a link in there, and it's done. So what metrics are kind of being used to justify that, because it is such a large line item increase, specifically from previous years into then 2019, 2020, 2021 budget. And then the other one was they're going, I guess, the recommendation to kind of flatten out the rent from the rent abatement. As a member, super pro that, increasing dues to do that by $20, $22, whatever it was, seemed really, really prudent and smart. And then one more thing on the social media, I've heard it mentioned because I know that it's really important to the Environmental Advisory Committee, the biophilic pledge. And I remember hearing that and kind of doing a survey of Reston social media for that word, for biophilic. And there were 4, and that was when I first started attending meetings. So July, there were 4 posts from the Reston Association. There are still only 4 posts, and there's no extra interaction on those posts about the biophilic community. And that was something that I heard mentioned at least 2 more times in board meetings. And so just as an example that there's no interaction on something that has been said that's kind of important. So that was just like kind of a little example. And yeah, those are my comments for tonight, because I could probably go on, but I'll stick to those. So what metrics are, being used to measure the effectiveness of the new social media? And then, I've got to say fiscal is really going line by line. They're really doing a good job. So, and there was a lot of insightful discussion last night.
Great, thank you.
Okay, our second question is by, or member comment is by Inder Saad.
Okay. Welcome, sir. I believe you're still on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Great.
Okay, well, thank you very much for doing all the work you do for our behalf. We really appreciate it.
And your
Right.
is?
So, Indersud, 2009 Halyard Lane in Reston. So my question is really relates to communications by RA. A few months ago, I had an exchange with Hank Lynch, and I was very glad to hear that he thinks communications is something that RA is trying to work to improve on. But to be honest, I have not found much improvement, at least in the last few months. I'd like to give you a specific example which might raise other questions in your mind too. You're aware of a construction project that has been stalling for the last 1 year at the South Lakes Village Center. There was a developer who started work last August on a small 8-week project and blocked off the pathways, the sidewalks. Then nothing happened. Nothing happened, an 8-week project, and some June or July, I finally called up RA and said, this project is a great inconvenience to all of us. So what's happening? So first response I got is a link to the newspaper announcement from last year announcing the project. So I said, no, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking when it's going to be done. Then I get a telephone number of the developer. Say, please call him. So I said, well, that's not my job. I mean, you are the one who are as an association. So finally, I get an answer saying, okay, we have an inspector on site now. We'll get back to you. So first question, of course, is it's surprising that the covenants people had done nothing for 9 months when the project was clearly stalled and eyesore for everybody and inconvenience. But then fortunately afterwards, I came back and said, yes, the developer has promised to come back. He's asking for a short extension and will be completed soon. Well, that was okay. It happens. 3-4 more months go by. Then I write to RA again saying, I've not heard back on the project is still stalled. What's happening? They said, well, we can't tell you because it's a covenant issue. Now, I can understand some issues which you cannot disclose, but when it's a covenant that's violating a sidewalk, blocking something. So I must say that it was surprising to me that why the covenants people would not tell us a simple question, why the sidewalks which are blocked, why the pathway that's blocked, when will it be, when the builder has committed to clear it. And I think that's something citizens should know. And I would really like to find out why covenant process is kept secretive. The good organizations actually post covenant violations on websites. So I just want to point out that RA has not been exactly very responsive to a simple question, which I think should be answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Inder.
Our next hand raised is by John Farrell.
Hello, John.
Good evening.
Good
Thanks for the time. My name is John Farrell. I'm at 11545 Under Oak Court. I am the president of Colonial Oaks Cluster and speaking on behalf of the cluster. Those of you who are at the last at-large listening session will have heard this before, but I think the full board needs to be aware of what we're dealing with. During one of the Reston Task Force meetings, the Fairfax County Park Authority announced that they had collected $25 million with an M dollars in proffers for recreational facilities. Park Authority has almost no land in Reston. Now only 4 parcels, small parcels. And I was just positioning that with the, $4 million we need to fix Lake Thoreau pool. And during the listening session, I pointed out that under the zoning ordinance, if you're dealing with a P district, and all of these residential developments are in P districts, the developer is obliged to make a dedication of so many dollars per unit for recreational facilities. Either they build them themselves, they give it to the Park Authority, or they give it to an adjacent homeowners association. That would be Reston Association. And I asked, had Reston made a written request that these monies be designated for Reston Association facilities? And the answer I got back was, no, there wasn't one. And then I pointed out that the master plan for Reston says that residential projects will join either the Reston Town, it's on page 8 of the comprehensive plan, will join either the Reston Town Center Association or will join Reston Association. And few of them, if any, have. And in fact, then I asked, well, had any correspondence gone from Reston Association to the planning commissioner or the supervisor, reminding of them of this provision of the comprehensive plan. Because obviously, if we can expand the number of units, we can increase our assessments and use that money to provide services not only to the people in the new facility, but to the people who already live here. Again, the answer was no, there hadn't been any correspondence reminding the planning commissioner and the board of supervisor, Hunter Mills supervisor, of the requirements of the comprehensive plan. Well, here's the thing that's interesting. Because of COVID and other market forces, almost every one of these projects is going to come back around again, because they're going to have to be changed. As just one example, the Tall Oaks project came in, I think it's either for 2 or 3 profit condition amendments. And what the board needs to understand is whenever a profit condition amendment is submitted, the entire rezoning is open. It starts all over again, clean slate. And we have, as an association, have an opportunity to say, folks, are these guys going to join the association? Are we going to have a proffer to that effect? And how much of the recreational proffer money is going to come to RA? And it seems to me there needs to be a writing from RA covering both of those points whenever these PCAs, proffer condition amendments, come in for all of these various and sundry projects. And I would hope that the board would expect a draft writing on each of these cases to be presented by staff for the board's endorsement going forward. And the third point on that is, in the Tyson's master plan, there is a provision that says non-residential development will make contributions to recreational facilities, not just residential. That provision needs to be incorporated into the Reston master plan, because these people who work in those non-residential facilities are going to be using our paths and using our ball fields. And if it's good enough for Tyson's, then it's good enough for Reston. Final point, I was at, as Karen knows, I was at the Covenants Committee meeting last night. Karen was there. And there came a time for a conversation about resolution number 6. And in particular, the Covenants Committee membership had a serious problem with the Reston staff having the ability to inspect the rear yards of Reston members' properties if they're enclosed. Well, as a president of my homeowners association, I need Reston's association staff, Covenant staff, to go into the back of enclosed properties. We had an instance where one of my predecessors changed a back door that was a conventional back door into a French door without getting any approvals. And the only way we could figure it out was to have somebody go in the backyard that was enclosed. There are lots of violations that go on in backyards. Inappropriate accumulation of junk and failure to maintain, they get overgrown. English ivy starts going crazy and invades other people's backyard. And the only way you can be aware of those circumstances is to enter into an enclosed backyard. Should there be notice? Fine. We already give 10 days notice before an inspection. But the idea that you're going to prohibit staff from going into somebody's backyard in order to make a determination that they're in compliance or to deal with a purported violation is bizarre. When you come to Reston, you consent to an inspection of your property. And for anybody to say that there's some kind of restriction on that ability is contrary to any law I know in common areas. I mean, and as many of you know, I write homeowner associations, I create them. And I have no way to understand or justify restricting Covenant staff from going into the backyards of members, either to pursue a violation complaint or to do a resale certification. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next.
It does not look like we have any hands raised. Jennifer has left a comment in the chat. Jennifer, would you like to pose your message?
No, I'm good. This board has already heard from me on that topic via
Okay.
email. but thank you.
As of right now, we have no other hands raised. Julie?
All right, thank you very much. Then we will go to item,
Julie,
oh, am I still on mute? Oh, yes, John?
I just want to pick up on a couple of points. We heard complaints from Liz Badley and Inder Sood about concerns about communications, and John Farrell has listed these. I want to make sure that at some point, either in this evening's meeting or later, that we get a report from our CEO on these matters.
Good suggestion, John. And I had noted to myself that some of these things that were raised deserve some answers back. That's one of the things we need to get back to kind of doing is when members make comments, we kind of log them and respond back. So, you know, a couple of years ago, we used to keep a log and did that on a regular basis. So thank you for reminding us, and we'll look for where it's appropriate to perhaps provide some level of answers or comments, if you will. All right, so I would like to move to the agenda item for the committee appointment approval of Mike Martin to the Elections Committee for his second 3-year term. So as recommended by Bach, and so the committee and we all are looking for a motion and a vote. Karen.
So moved.
Second.
A second. Sorry, Sarah. Bob got to it faster than you. May I have a vote? Can we all approve Mike Martin for elections?
Aye.
I thank you, Mike. Thank you very much, everyone, for that, and welcome Mike Martin to his second 3-year re-up on elections.
Julie, I think I saw Ven join the meeting.
Ven, have you joined?
Yes, I'll abstain on that particular vote, but can you hear me?
Yes, I can now, Ven. Thank you for joining us. I don't, perhaps Shalice picked up when you joined the meeting from a timestamp. Okay.
I did pick it up.
Thank you. All right. We're now on executive session on violation matters. To our members who are here with us tonight, I'm not anticipating this will be a long executive session, but we will be moving into a break room and returning so with the presumption that I get a motion to move into executive session.
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I think that was from Tom. All in favor of that? Hands and Mike voice and then voice.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Great. All right, folks, we'll be back shortly.
Hi, John. It's nice to see you. I liked your comments on the proffers. I remember reading something that you wrote like when I was still working for RA about proffers and how Reston should go after them.
Yes.
You're back on mute, John.
Can you hear?
Yes, we can now. Oh, you're back on mute again.
Sorry, folks, we're not allowing conversations during the executive session. Thank you. Julie, you're muted. Julie, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I didn't see my little mute button. I was making sure I had Mike Collins on the cell phone. So Shalice, Mike is on in the meeting and he is listening.
Oh, so he was, because on my side it said that he didn't join.
Right, he got kicked out. So he called in. All right. Give me one moment.
Okay.
All right, I'm back. Sorry. All right, are you ready for my motions? We're back in the main room, yes?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to move that the Reston Association Board of Directors certifies to the best of each member's knowledge that only those matters appropriate for executive session of a violation nature were heard, discussed, or considered by the board during executive session. Might I have a second? Thank you, Karen. And votes, all certified. I see Karen, yes. Okay, I got a yes. I got yes from everyone. Mike Collins, is that a yes?
I'll abstain.
Okay, he abstains. And Ben. Because Mike wasn't in the whole executive.
Okay.
Remember, we had that difficulty in him joining us. So I believe that's appropriate abstention because he was not participating. And Ben? Ben? You're on mute, Ben.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so that's 8 yes and 1 abstention. I'd like to move to ratify the decision reached in executive session to adopt the October Legal Committee's report and affirm the decisions reached therein. Might I have a second? Sarah, thank you. And all in favor of that? Again, hands, please.
Ben says aye.
And Ben says aye, and Mike Collins would abstain.
I will also abstain, yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, it carries. Next item we have is a quick update from Tom and or Larry on the Recreation Facilities Working Group. I know you've had a couple meetings since our last full board meeting. So if you could share with us some of your progress.
Sure. Let me start and then I'll throw it to Larry. Let's see. The Recreation Facility Working Group is reviewing all the facilities that Reston Association owns and maintains. As Larry has mentioned several times in past meetings, most of the facilities were given to RA by developers, which means most of our amenities are over 40 years old. The working group is creating a tool, we're calling it the decision maker, that we can turn over to the board that will allow the board to decide what to do with each facility. And what I mean by that is, do we improve it? Do we remove it? Do we repurpose it? This tool is made up of several components, including the cost, usage, social and geographic equity, and value to the neighborhood. As an example, let me use our pools. When we look at our pools, the shell of a pool has a life expectancy of 40 to 50 years with a price tag close to $1 million. This price tag does not take into consideration that most of the facilities will need to be updated to be in compliance with today's standards. I think Lake Thoreau Pool is a good example of this. The main thing we're looking at right now is within the next 5 years, the board will need to decide what to do with 5 pools. We have Lake Thoreau Pool, we have Audubon, Ridge Heights, Newbridge, and Shadowwood, because they will have reached the end of their life expectancy within the next 5 years. And I'm sure 40 years ago, people appreciated having a pool or a tennis court that their family could walk to and enjoy. And I assume back then, most people did not have their own transportation. So having a facility within walking distance may have been very important. And the question I would pose is that true today? Or do people drive to the facility, the pool, the tennis courts, the trails that they prefer rather than walk to the closest one? Last meeting, we did have Bob and Dave from the fiscal committee join us to get their perspective. Each facility will have a capital expense to either improve it, remove it, or repurpose it. But there's a continued maintenance expense that is just as important to consider when trying to determine if this is a facility that the community wants. The working group is making progress on fine-tuning this facility tool. And I would say hopefully by next meeting, I'll have more information to pass along. Thank you, guys. Larry, if you have anything to add, please jump in.
Actually, Tom, you did a great job outlining where we are. So I really have nothing to add.
Okay.
Yes, you did. Excellent. Having been at some of those meetings, I thought you captured it quite well. It's a challenge that we've placed before that working group to help create that decision matrix and wrestle with some of the infrastructure stuff we've got coming up. So thank you very much. Capital projects, forecasting and funding, I believe, Chris, you are up.
One moment, let me get the presentation shared here. Okay. So tonight I wanted to kind of talk to you about the draft 3 capital budget. And first off, some of the major budget impacts that are part of draft 3. First and foremost, as you all know, is Lake Thoreau Pool. So within this draft 3, we have included the Lake Thoreau Pool project split between 21 and 22, as I've mentioned on multiple occasions. We've also shifted some other major projects that are in the next 2 years further out in order to give the facility working group a little bit more time to evaluate, as well as staff, to then come up with some recommendations. And we'll also be working on developing the 22 and 23 budget far earlier in 21 to create a capital improvement plan with a lot of the recommendations that have been given by the facilities working group. Just kind of want to start off with that as a big impact for draft 3. So before you is the current draft 3 budget as it stands. We're getting really, really close to having this fully wrapped up. There's still a few small items we need to check and address. You know, the market is extremely fluid right now, so we're trying our best to try to nail this down with the best numbers we possibly can. So right now we are looking at a $3.4 million capital budget for 21, and which is actually just shy of a $750,000 difference between the original draft budget that was developed back in 2019. And I'm going to get into some more details here about the changes. So $1.3 million in capital work has been deferred to future years. And this includes Lake Ann Dam, Glade Tennis, some vehicles and mowers, Lake Newport siding, some projects at Glade, and some other projects at Newbridge. But we've also included or adjusted some other projects that total about $0.6 million. This includes Lake Thoreau Pool renovations I've mentioned, Tall Oaks Pool plaster, tile, and coping, the Glade slide refurbishment, and some other minor adjustments and projects for other smaller projects. So getting into some detail about some of these changes. So, and Larry, feel free to jump in. So Lake Ann Dam was originally, the project was to alter the dam in order to meet Virginia Dam Safety Code for overtopping Wheelie Avenue during a design flood. So we're talking, like a 500-year storm. So a technical advisory committee will be formed by the state to evaluate dam regulations for all structures in the Commonwealth. And this was really triggered by a lot of dam owners, including Reston, about some of their concerns on how they would actually be able to both meet the requirements technically and financially. So the TAC has been delayed due to the pandemic, and we don't expect it to really have a decision formalized for about 2 years. So as a result, we've moved the project forward until the TAC has had more time to reach a decision. And at that point, we'll start looking at reevaluating the budget and putting the project back into play. But in the meantime, we'll maintain our provisional status with the state as an approved, so there won't be any penalties imposed. Another key project is Glade Tennis. Next year, we had originally scheduled just to do some laser regrading of the surface and retrofitting of the LED lights. Following some further evaluation and exploration by staff, we determined it's going to need a little bit more work than that. We suspect that the tree impact back in 2018 has caused some unseen damage to the subsurface irrigation system that can't be easily identified and repaired. So as a result, we're moving this project a bit further forward in time to then do it more comprehensively, somewhat like we did over at North Hills Tennis just the other year. And this will help resolve these drainage issues bring the court back to kind of a modern standard and really retrofit the lighting system so it's a lot more energy efficient. Another change is like Newport siding. So in 2021, we had originally scheduled the facility to be replaced with cementitious planks or hardy plank. This is a conversion we've been making at all of our facilities over time, and most recently we did it at Autumnwood Pool. In 2020, this year, we made some cosmetic repairs, we repainted it, we patched it, and we decided, after doing these repairs, we think we could probably squeeze a few more years out of this siding. So we've pushed the project further forward in time, and we're not expecting to have any massive increases in costs. It will be some with inflation, and we believe that a lot of the repairs we've done will probably mitigate any of these substructure issues that are probably there. So for right now, we just moved that one forward. One addition we've made to the budget is Tall Oaks Pool. So following spring and fall evaluations, we discovered there are multiple pop-outs in the pools or plaster delaminations, and the picture to the right is an example of one. So what we need to do in order to correct this issue more permanently is to chip out this accumulated plaster. So over time, after each plaster, which is around between 7 and 10 years, you add another 3/8 inch of plaster. And so at this point, we're almost up to 2 inches worth of plaster. So in order to maintain the plaster coating in the future, we really need to kind of scrape it off and start over again. So that's what we're planning on doing for next year, because if we don't do this, we're going to be probably at risk of not being able to pass code with the Fairfax County, because these pop-outs will continue to occur and we have to have a clean, smooth, white, clean surface in order to pass code requirements. Another addition is Glade slide. During the fall inspections, we noted a lot of delaminations of the coating at Glade slide. So you can see in this image above, some of the paint is peeling off, and that exposes the fiberglass body to UV light. And those two things don't really get along with each other very well. UV light will actually start to degrade fiberglass over time. So it was determined that in 2021, in order to keep the slide, operating at its optimum efficiency and enjoyment of the membership, we need to strip the slide and re-gel coat it in and out. So this is the overall summary of all the changes. And you can see from line by line what we have modified either up or down, and shows the overall delta of just shy of that $750,000 million from the first draft that we had back in 2019 to the one now. Are there any questions?
You're on mute, John.
I have one, Chris. So at our October the 8th meeting, we heard a presentation from Ken Fredgren, the chair of the Reston Accessibility Committee, requesting considerations for 4 improvements: 2 automatic door openers and 2 accessibility improvements at parks. And so I'm wondering, are these 4 proposals included in our 2021 budget? If not, when will they be evaluated, and when might they be evaluated for inclusion in our capital program?
So right now, they're not currently in this budget. Some of the improvements, especially at the pavilions, will incur some substantial costs. So I would feel we probably would, I would like some board direction to include it. The door openers, I think, are something we could probably manage without too much impact to the budget. But I can also add those as well if I'm directed to do so.
To give an order of magnitude cost, John, the accessibility improvements, and these are very rough order of magnitude costs. We had a contractor go out there with us, with the landscape architect. For the temporary road pavilion, it's about $150,000. And for the North Hills Pavilion, it's about $100,000.
And the door openers?
Those will probably be around 10,000 each.
Okay. So what would be the normal course for evaluating any of these 4 suggested improvements? When would that happen if it doesn't happen now?
Well, we would probably put them in an early draft. I mean, I think certainly the door openers, I think we should do those immediately. I would I would certainly, I would recommend, since we're already going to be doing the parking lot at Temporary Road Picnic Pavilion, and some of the accessibility improvements there are implicated by the parking lot and attached directly to the parking lot. So that would be an easy marriage, if you will, to put those together. And because Temporary Road is one of our oldest pavilions, I would recommend doing that one first. But typically we'd have to put those in an early draft for the board's consideration.
Okay, and you had not heard of this before Ken spoke on October the 8th?
No, we actually got a report from the Reston Accessibility Committee for both Temporary Road and North Hills. And when we received that, that's when we went out with a landscape architect as well as the contractor to do a quick evaluation. So we could have that rough order of magnitude cost to at least have this conversation.
Okay. What you're saying is it would make sense to incorporate that into a larger scope of work on those sites. Is that correct, Larry?
For Temporary Road, yes. I believe, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Temporary Road, the parking lot is in for next year.
It is. It's not a lot of money. Originally, we were just going to be doing some crack repairs and milling. But to do what we'd need to get it to ADA compliant would require a substantial increase in the budget to accomplish it.
Okay. So I'm not asking for a decision here, but how we would go about evaluating this and when. I have some sympathy to include the automatic door openers at one or both of those, both the Nature House and Lake House, since they are both major community facilities. I don't want to make more difficult an already difficult capital budget, but I'm wondering whether other board members share my interest in making those, at least those two improvements sometime sooner.
My behalf, I would like to see that we at least address those two sites, Nature House and Lake House.
Julie, I can barely hear you.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
A little bit.
About the same.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't changed anything since the beginning of the meeting. I support the two door openers for Lake House and Nature, Walker Nature. If you're telling me it's about 10,000 each.
It's approximate. I need to do a little bit more digging. We did some initial look at, but I'd probably need to get a contractor involved to kind of give me a better idea of the exact cost. But if you're looking at it, I would say at least 10,000 each.
I would support that too, if there's at all room in the budget.
Would somebody care to make a motion for staff to consider?
Yes, I move
this to be included.
I move that we direct staff to include in the capital budget for 2021 automatic door openers for Nature House and Lake House.
I second that.
I have a quick question.
Well, I have to say something over here. So this is why.
Yes,
this is why. I mean, you've lost your compass to be able to make any sort of wise judgments. We have a pool, and we have 10 pools coming up in the next 10 years. We have a bill of $30 million that we don't know how to pay, and we thought we were going to prioritize based on safety and maintenance, and now door openers at 10,000 each is not a big deal. I mean, really, you guys should consider yourself you should think to yourself again whether you're capable of making these wise decisions in a situation like this. Seriously.
Okay,
Just as I'm listening to a meeting, and this guy's
this is just a proposal for it.
total asshole.
But the issue here is one of compliance and access to a segment of the of our population that is right now limited in their ability to use both the lake house and Walker Nature Center. Yeah, I agree that this is kind of seemingly a haphazard approach, but given the other expenses that we face, this is one that we should at least discuss, which we're doing right now. And Ben, you made your point very clearly that this is seemingly, we're seemingly off the rails. So,
Sarah, I believe you wanted to comment.
I did. I have a quick question. Walker Nature Center, doesn't Friends of Reston pay for that?
No.
No.
The facility is operated and maintained by Reston Association. I mean, perhaps they could make a donation. I'm not really quite sure the details of that.
We can make a request to the Friends of Reston. Actually, we could make a request for funding both these stores to the Friends of Reston. We'll have to wait, I believe, until next year. Their next meeting is the annual meeting in November, where there's no business being conducted at that meeting. Right. So we could put a request in, but we wouldn't have an answer probably until after the first of the year. Yeah, and we'd have to do what Chris and Larry are talking about, which is bring in a contractor, get the details and the exact amount that we're asking for, and that we need to do both these doors, and then give the proposal to Friends of Reston and see if they consider it.
The one consideration is, if the board should decide, and quite frankly, I think these are two very worthy projects to make those facilities much more accessible, would be to have them in the budget. And if in fact the Friends of Reston agrees to pay for them, then it essentially becomes a reimbursement effort.
And they may agree to contribute a portion of that as well. So, but at least we will have the appropriate estimate of cost, right, before the end of the year and before they have their next meeting.
Would there be any way that we could find out whether they have the funds available to support this endeavor?
They do have the funds available, yes.
Aha, source of funds.
Yes. Remember last year, I think it was that they contributed, or maybe we did it this year with their funds for lighting at Walker Nature.
Correct.
Yeah. So, good idea on that.
I would just say that I recognize and actually agree with them that it's unfortunate that this is brought up, and indeed I'm the one bringing it up at this last minute. But for whatever reason, it was not brought forward earlier. Yeah. However, secondly, these are both two major community facilities. And thirdly, we do have ADA accessibility requirements, especially for both of them are unique community facilities. It's not as though persons with accessibility limitations can go to other places and get the same thing, and that's why I made the motion, and so I want to clarify that.
Any more discussion?
The second question.
Sarah.
Sorry, Larry, can you confirm if the Nature Center?
The Nature Center, what?
Sarah, you broke up.
Yeah.
Sarah, we could not, broke up, we couldn't understand you.
You're muted, Sarah.
Perhaps. While Sarah's there we go. Sarah, we didn't hear what you asked for confirmation of.
Is the walkway at either of these facilities ADA compliant?
Yes.
Yes.
Both, okay.
Any other board director wish to make a comment?
May I ask that the motion be repeated? I want to make sure that I understand what we're voting on.
So my motion was that the board directs staff to include the automatic door openers for both Nature Center and the Lake House in the 2021 capital budget.
Okay.
May I call
May,
it a second?
may I offer a friendly amendment
Sure, Bob.
that we explore the possibility of the Friends of Reston either providing part or all of the funds necessary to make the changes?
Absolutely.
Point of order.
Yes.
Point of order.
Okay.
Yes,
It's
Thank
no
you.
such thing as a friendly amendment, so we would need to. Actually, Bob, I think that would be a subsidiary motion. I think you could pass John's motion and then make your motion because they're not mutually exclusive.
Okay, thank you.
I can also assure you we're going to do it. It's on the list of asking them. So we'll get that done.
So I will call the vote for John's motion. All in favor of having the automated door Walker Nature added into our 2021 capital project.
Aye.
I'm looking for eyes and hands. So
Aye.
that was an aye from.
Ben says no.
Ben says no. Sarah, what's your? Sarah, yes or no?
I'm going to vote no for adding it to the draft budget, but definitely for exploring. I'm a yes.
Okay, so we have 2 no's and 7 yeses, I believe. I don't have the grid in front of me again. Let me see if I can get it.
There we go.
Yep. I think Mike was a yes.
7 with Mike Collins and 2 no's from Ben and Sarah. It passes. Now, I believe we had another motion that someone.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that the funding for said projects that be explored with Friends of Reston to determine whether they could completely or partially fund the changes.
And I'll second it.
Thank you, Sarah. All in favor of that?
I do have something to say before we go ahead. There's usually a discussion before a vote.
Fine, Ben.
Okay, so yeah, I would say that the only motion to include in the draft budget should be after we explore this option, because it's something that should be explored. If it's already in the draft budget, then why would you want to explore? So if it just makes sense that you first explore this option and then look at modifying the budget. The staff is presenting us a budget and telling us what's going to work, and let's look at that and work with Friends of Reston. And we've already given them funds before for other initiatives that they are taking, and if this is something that they can do, then this should be taken up with them.
I believe we have a.
So I would say contingent or after, dependent after we explore with Friends of Reston.
All right, Ben, I believe there's a timing issue in that if we would like it to be included in our 2021 budget, which we just passed that motion, the Friends of Reston does not actually meet to conduct business until January.
Then why go through this charade of making a motion? It's just not going to. It's fine. Make the motion and call the vote, because it just seems like you want to make this motion, but it's not really anything material coming out of it. Yeah.
Karen?
Well, from my perspective, I think this is something that some of us would like in the budget, regardless of whether we at some point down the road get reimbursement full or partial from Friends of Reston. That's why I voted for the motion.
Any other directors wish to comment?
And indeed, that's why I made the motion. So,
All right, then I'm going to call the question. All in favor of Bob's motion to ask for exploration with Friends of Reston for partial or total financial contribution towards the roads for Lake House and Nature House. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
I see.
Aye from Ben.
Aye from Ben, aye from Sarah. Mike Collins.
Aye. Aye.
I believe we have 9 yeses on that one. And we will certainly explore that. Thank you. Chris, you want to continue? I believe we were on your budget summary.
Yeah, that's all that I had. If there's any further questions, but that's all I have for tonight.
Bob, you had a question?
Yes, Chris, as I recall from last night's fiscal committee meeting, there will be a total of 3 pools that will be out of order completely next year should the budget be adopted, or the capital budget be adopted. Is that correct?
Lake Thoreau, Shadowwood, and Tall Oaks, I believe, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that all the board members understood will be at 12, a max of 12 pools next year, assuming that we can open the pools and we don't have any uncertainty around those.
Sarah, I believe you, yes.
My question was Glade pool. Do you know a downtime? How long?
The slide, we expect we could get that done before opening. We'll have to get that one coordinated very early, assuming weather isn't too unpredictable, but I think it'd be easy enough to get it done before opening. We've done it before.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. No further questions of Chris. We will move on to the next agenda item, which I believe is Bob Petrine.
Yes. I'm going to spend as little time as people choose to allow me on what we have done through the first 9 months of this year. I want to talk a moment about the forecast versus budget, which shame on me, but I didn't get into the package, but I will share with you very quickly. And lastly, Tom Deal has assembled a cash forecast through the end of the year for operations, and I wanted to bring the board current on that. So in terms of assessments, total assessments are up over $550,000 over last year, and collections are running about $153,000 over where we were at the same time last year. The reason that assessments are up is we did add a number of additional members for townhouse developments that have come online. But if we look at accounts receivable, those are largely made up of members that have yet to fully pay their annual assessments. Those are running at about $400,000 over where we were a year ago. And it leaves us with about 91% of all of the assessments due for 2020 have been collected versus 93% that were collected in 2019. If we look at the revenues and expenses versus budget, advertising and member service fees are down about half versus budget, about $76,000. Recreational amenities and services revenue are down as a result of the pandemic, about $1.3 million or 74% over their budgeted amounts. But at the same time, related recreational operation expenses are also down about $1,100,000 or 30%. While total revenue is down $1,005,000 or 8.25%. Total expenses are also down a total of 2.1 million or 16.6%. These are a result of cost-cutting, deferral of certain projects and expenses, postponing of budgeted hires, and paring down of seasonal hires. At September 30th this year, total cash is down about 550,000 over where we were in 2019. But operating cash, that which we pay our day-to-day expenses, is up about 621,000. The primary driver for RA's cash position is an additional $1.3 million spent in 2020 on capital projects. So if I can share my screen with you, and hopefully it will pop up. This is going to be, is everybody seeing on the left-hand side of this, the operating forecast, Reston Association operating forecast for 2020? Oh, okay. You see it now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. This is, I've taken a report that Tom generated and put it in an Excel spreadsheet because just the way I operated. And what I'm trying to represent here is, although total revenues are down almost a little over 1.9 million, and you can see all the categories for which we have red numbers, negative variances. If you look below at the operating expenses, you'll see that only 2 categories out of the 37 expense categories that are here are in the red. Or in other words, they are we have spent more than we had budgeted for at this point in the year. So on a net basis, we are better off by 455,000 or 456,000 at this point in the year. It's one of the directors asked a question whether this was if this was in the black, and it's really we are going to generate, if this forecast holds true, about $3.5 million increase in our surplus from operations, as opposed to the $3 million that we budgeted for the year. The last thing that excuse me?
Questions about?
I wanted to go on one other item, and then I wanted to relinquish my time to Hank, because he's going to talk about the budget, which is much more interesting than what I'm going to refer to now. Tom put together a cash forecast for the remainder of the year, and this is to give us an idea, without considering the impact of early paid fees, member fees, what our cash position may be if everything holds true in our forecasts. Right now, we have $5.3 million in cash. We expect to add through the remaining 3 months of the year about $340,000 in gross revenue, and we will incur about $3.3 million in additional expenses. So at the end of the year, Tom is projecting that we will have about $2.4 million in cash. So now I'll ask, are there any questions that anyone has? And I'll stop my share.
The 2.4 mil that you listed there, is that after we've put our money aside for our support?
No. No. That brings us up to year end before we make any adjustments, any transfers from operating funds into the reserve funds.
Okay.
And that does not consider either. It does not also consider the amount of money that is in the capital reserves as well as investments. This is strictly operating funds. How much money we have available to pay bills.
Questions of the treasurer?
This is not a question, this is a comment. I just want you to know that I very much appreciate all these reports that you give us, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you.
I concur. I actually would understand them. And that's coming from a person who is more of a marketing strategy person, not a finance. So kudos to you and Tom and Aaron, the whole fiscal committee.
The fiscal committee has been incredibly supportive. I think we've got a great partnership going, very active participation, good group of people, and very interested in making sure that Reston is financially sound.
That was evidence here. Yes, in the fiscal meeting. So shall we move to, I think you wanted to give Hank some of the time, right?
Right.
Okay, my turn. I'm going to be working, I think it's page 109 in the overall packet. So Shalisa, I don't know if you can bring that page up, but as you get to that point, what I'd like to start off by is, and this is the comments I shared with the fiscal committee yesterday evening. As we look at how we built the 2020 budget, and it's really designed around our budget build out starting in 2019 was really looking at the strategic plan 2020 through 2022. And I know you all had a chance to look at the strategic plan, but for 2020, there were a couple of key elements that we needed to incorporate into that. And first and foremost, we really had a deteriorating IT system in place. And so a significant amount of money in 2020 was invested in helping upgrade our IT system. And I think most of you are aware we had file server issues. We had some unsupported software. We had some other breakdowns. Fortunately, we were able to bring Claire on board, and she's been addressing all of those. And as we move forward, they will not continue to be an issue. In fact, as I get into talking about the 2021 budget, we'll share where Claire has been able to cut some of the projected expenses down. As was mentioned earlier during members' comments, one of the other things we were really focused on, and this came from members, was how do we, and actually it came from board members, how do we improve communications? And one of the specific goals that was shared with me by a board member was, excuse me, how do we cut down on using paper? And so that really wonderful glossy magazine that a lot of people, many people enjoyed, but was exceedingly expensive, that went away. But also we looked into how can we improve our social media. And as was pointed out, several staff, new staff were brought on board to do so. I think it's a little misleading as you look to that budget and growing because there's other things that went into as you look at the communications budget and all the department budgets growing, because the other component that was factored in was the initiation of the Archer study at the end of 2018. The board at that point in time looked at some of the loss of key staff and decided they wanted to look a little bit more deeply into this. And the Archer report came back and talked about salaries and wages and compensation. And the board in 2019 approved some significant adjustments, and those also reflect in all of the payroll that you see in that reflect in the 2020 budget. That was done in two steps, and you'll hear about the second step here in a second. But I don't know if, just to kind of address some of the comments made about communications and the especially the social media communications. I don't know if Mike, if you wanted to share a little bit about how how we measure this, the various measurements of what we're looking at, the variety of social media we're using, as well as kind of, I think, the marketing strategy there. You can over push things when it comes to social media. And so Mike, if you just briefly share a little bit about that so we can answer that member's comments.
Sure, happy to, Hank. I'm just starting up my camera here, but so we do track both on a monthly basis and a quarterly basis our social media trends. We've been doing that since the beginning of the year. And Hank, I know in your quarterly CEO report, you also provide some update information on how we've been trending with social media. Most organizations do track a number of, in particular, 4 key things that we look at. It used to be in the old days, people looked at likes. That used to be, well, gee, if there were more likes or if there were more followers, that was sort of an indicator of good social media engagement. We now know that those are really only 2 minor points. What we really look at and track on a monthly and a quarterly basis are likes, total reach, how far is that post that we're making actually reaching in terms of the number of people that are actually seeing it, the total number of impressions, and the overall total engagement. Now, we're really fortunate because Facebook, although they play with their analytics, gives us the ability to track those 4 key components every month. We look at those, we track some various aspects of that with LinkedIn and Twitter as well. Instagram, their engagement results are not quite as accurate, although we do kind of track and monitor the followers we get on Instagram. I can tell you that we've seen pretty consistent growth in all of those categories from January through the last report. I haven't yet seen my end of month September report yet, but we are trending positive in all of those categories. We did have a little downturn in August around impressions. And quite frankly, unlike most of our summers at RA, the activity level was a little bit slower, right? We had some pools open. We didn't have as many Parks and Recs activities going. So we weren't doing quite the extent of posts we would normally do in a July and August period. Saw a little bit of dip on impressions and engagement in August. But beyond that, even despite COVID, from the beginning of the year on, we've been seeing growth in those areas. We track the numbers, not just to track the numbers, but we're looking at the trends. And more importantly, we're looking at the posts in particular that we're posting. As you know, we post activities, we post meetings, we post environmental information. And what we're starting to do, because we're following the trend lines, is looking at which of the posts that we're doing in social media really are moving the needle and having the highest engagement levels. You know, just recently, some of you saw the social media post on the turtle launch. That, and then a month or 2 before that, we had, I believe it was a scout project that also had high engagement. Earlier in the season, we did a little test where people could just post animals that they saw on the trails, just to see what types of posts are getting engagement from our members. And no doubt, the environmental ones absolutely tug at the heartstrings, and we see some of the highest engagement numbers. No surprise, kids in camps. Anything we say about camps has a high level of engagement. But we are watching the trends. We are tracking and reporting this information monthly and quarterly. And like I said, Hank includes that information in his quarterly CEO report. And also, one of the reasons why we're looking at what trends are moving the needle, and I know we've had a member ask the question or make the comment about wasteful spending of social media dollars on posts. The reality is, the way the Facebook algorithms work, when you start feeding the monster, it requires you to continue to feed the monster. And we do, on a rare occasion, we'll rely on an organic post where we put something out there and hope that things will be shared and grow on their own. But there are some things that we really do have to boost in order to get the type of reach that we need, in some cases in a very short period of time. The reason we're looking at the trends is because it will help us make boost buying decisions as we move forward. And remember, we just added the social media staff the tail end of 2019. So this is really only the first, 10 months that we've had these two individuals on staff. And from my perspective, we've seen some pretty positive engagement numbers, far more than we have really seen in the past, because we do have full-time people that are focused on this. But more importantly, they're not just focused on doing posts, they're focused on looking at the trends, tracking the analytics, and all that data will help us make better decisions as we move into 2021.
Thanks, Mike. Sorry, Bob.
Yeah, Mike, I'm one of the elderly folks on the board, and the only term that I recognized of the four that you mentioned was likes, which is the least important.
Yeah.
Rather than take up the time in a board meeting, could we schedule, or anybody that might be interested, and sit down with you and really get an understanding of how this all fits together?
Yeah, be happy to. Yeah, I'd be happy.
I know
to
enough
set
to
that
be
up.
dangerous.
Yeah,
I want to do that too.
Well, and understand too, it's evolving. What's current today could change in a month. Algorithms are always changing. And it's one of those things where, in Facebook in particular, anybody that's dealing with social media knows that they're constantly playing with the algorithms. So what you're getting for results today, they could tweak something behind the scenes tomorrow that can completely change the results you're getting. And, they don't hand you out a playbook. So what you need to do is kind of figure out through trial and error, okay, they changed this, so now we've got to do that in order to get the impact that we want to get. But I'd be happy to set up a kind of a little training session for those that are interested.
Great.
Thank you, Mike. And Mike, and that's Mike's offer, like Tom's offer, and any senior staff member, if you need to or would like to sit down and chat with them, please do so. They're very knowledgeable. So just to kind of briefly just sum up where the budget was being built around, just going back, we had IT issues we had to address. We needed to improve our communications and actually look for some cost savings and efficiencies there. We also were given a directive to look at implementing the staff retention program and staff morale program, and that was partially done with the Archer study to significantly improve customer service. And I think you've been hearing some of that, some of the wonderful comments we're getting from a lot of the staff interactions, both in covenants and Parks and Recs and member services. And the really big one where we haven't been able to do well in 2020 was the goal of growing non-assessment revenue. We all know that we need to pursue proffers, and we want to see about other revenue sources, but the one that's the really one that we could work very hard to address in the immediacy was non-assessment revenue. And the goal between 2020 and 2022 was to increase non-assessment revenue from about 14% of total revenue to about 20%. While that doesn't sound like a lot, it's a pretty substantial number. And in order to do that, we did indeed hire a new staff member, a business engagement and sales manager, and they were making really great progress. And then COVID hit, and everything kind of slowed down. But we know that it'll work once we get back to what ultimately will become our new normal. So those are the five major things that are built the budget last year, and they really stay the main things as pretty much the main things as we're going forward. As you look at the budget, and I'm not going to go line by line, we certainly answer any questions after I get through this, but on starting on packet page number 109, let me just tell you some of the highlights. With this budget, the way we're presenting it today, there is no assessment increase. It's staying at 708. There was conversation at the fiscal committee last night, and I think when I get done the presentation, Dave Kerr, maybe Bob might want to point out an alternative way of looking at this, which I absolutely agree with. But for presenting right now, this budget, the way we build it, does not include increasing assessments. They stay at 708. One of the ways we've gotten to this is there will be no staff merit pay increase. This will basically save us about $210,000. We also, through our HR, just doing really good work, have been able to keep our dental health and disability coverage flat. So it's going to be essentially the same as it was in 2020. We are going to reduce our authorized full-time headcount by one. We're having a retiring person. We have 4 retiring positions. One of those positions we're not going to fill in 2021. We're going to shift some of their duties to another position to see if we can get some efficiency. If that doesn't work, then we'll have to come back and look at it in 2022. But of the 4 retiring positions, 1 we're not going to fill. We're going to shift their duties. 3 of the retiring positions, we're going to delay hiring until later into the first quarter. And we also have 3 current vacancies in 2020 that we're not going to fill into the first quarter. All of what I just described will basically save us another roughly $200,000, just below $200,000 in the 2021 budget. We have mentioned the Archer report 3 times now in just this brief introduction. The Archer report and the board in 2019 approved moving forward with it, but it was we divided it into 2 steps. The first step was indeed initiated at the start of 2020. And that's, again, why you see some of the jump, 2019 to 2020. The second phase of it was to be implemented in 2021. We are not proposing to do that in 2021. And it certainly can be part of a discussion as we go into 2022 budget, but that represents another savings of about $445,000. And just to kind of put in perspective as I go into the next point, or 2 points down, central, and typically our staff are, just to kind of, let me just tell you what we have normally with part-time and seasonal staff. Typically it's about 250 to 260 individuals. Because of what went on with COVID last year, and you know where these positions are. A lot of them are helping with camps, they're lifeguards, they're a lot of folks that serve in our central services. We basically did not fill those slots. And that saved us $831,000 off of last year. But going into 2021, and just kind of backing up a little bit, of those slots, those seasonal slots, about 15 of them fit into central services. And many of these people aren't college kids or high school students. These are actually adults that come and work with us year after year, and they mow the grass, they support the landscaping work and that sort of thing. This year, we were only able to bring 2 of them on board of the 15. As we go into 2021, we're going to be proposing bringing 5 of them back. So I'll get to that in just a second. Tracking down on this list where it talks about capital, Chris has already gone through what we are planning on being able to defer into future years. And the big ticket item on that is the Lake Ann Dam. And basically, as Chris has shared, the state has to put together a task force to kind of an advisory task force to look at what the recommendations are going to be. That hasn't been done because of COVID. It's not going to probably get done until the end of this year. And then usually those task force take anywhere from 18 to 24 months go through their process to come back with a new ruling. So the funding essentially for Lake Ann Dam, if we just held it in place, would be sitting there and we couldn't do anything with it for at least 18 to 24 months. So what we are proposing, and based on the feedback we've gotten for Lake Thoreau Pool, is that we believe with the money that's available, we can initiate the work that would be taking place at Lake Thoreau Pool in its 2-year process to get it where we need to get it, to rebuild it. So that's being proposed and laid out there as a board decision. The funding is available if you choose to take that route to do the first of the 2 phases, the 2021 phase for the Lake Thoreau Pool. So that will be one of your discussion and decision points. Getting back to central services, one of the other ways we're looking to save money, and this may sound a little, when I first heard it was, and when I first came on board, I asked, why do we do it this way? But there is a reason for it. RA fights every 5 years and competes every 5 years to get the mowing contract from VDOT for all of the major highways that VDOT controls through Reston. We do that and so that we can control the look and mow the grass in the median strips and along the major throughways. VDOT, by its rules and regulations, only allocates in their contract to mow that grass, mow those areas 3 times. And they allocate $45,000 to do it based on the acreage that we have to mow. We, for years, have not done that. We have actually mowed it. We've gotten a contract. We've competed for it and received the contract. And we mow the median strips and the highways 24 times. Basically, it's costing us about $160,000 above and beyond what VDOT is paying to do that. The other thing that is interesting about all of this is that for us to do the median strips that VDOT pays us for, we use our own staff, the temporary staff I was telling you about, the 5 that we want to bring back. And we use a contractor to mow the open space, our ball fields and other open spaces, which are actually a little easier to mow than the median strip. That contract's about $200,000. So what we have put into this budget, and it will indeed be another decision point for the board, is to not hire the contractors to mow our open space, and for us to because we still have the contract through VDOT, for us to only mow the throughways 8 times this year. So the grass will get a little bit higher. We thought it was appropriate because we talk about being a biophilic community and a biophilic, wanting to demonstrate biophilic techniques. So that's why that is in there. By doing that, we will save $200,000 annually out of the budget. And that's also reflected in the numbers that you're seeing right now. And that's a decision point for all of you as we decide on this budget. The IT, Claire has done a great job. We were using some outside support from a couple of companies with help desks and other things like that. They have gotten it down so that we will not be using that service going into 2021. At least part of it, and it is saving about $45,000 to $50,000 out of the original IT plan. We also are delaying a couple of positions in covenants until the first quarter. That's saving some additional dollars. And I know that how we manage and take care of the lakes in reference to both algae blooms and aquatic plants, we have looked at that very hard. We've looked and spoken to the experts that we know, and we are indeed upping the activity that we're doing, the treatment that we're doing on all of our lakes. That is written in the document in detail that I've sharing with you. But to put it in a nutshell, we are just about doubling the amount of money we're going to be spending on both the treatment for aquatic plants and a treatment for algae blooms. It's essentially an 86% increase above what we spent last year. Last year, we spent about $17,000 on actual treatments. This year, we're changing some of those treatments out and increasing that to just under $32,000. So, and then there's some other additional smaller items we're looking at doing. For example, increasing rental of the lake house and conference center and our pavilions and Glade room just a little bit, about 5%, which will potentially generate about $15,000. And then our camps that we had planned to operate in 2020, we're bringing those back. And just like for 2021, and just like in 2020, if it becomes obvious that we can't do them because of COVID, or we have to modify them, we'll do it the way we've done for the 2020 budget, which will make adjustments, keep the board informed. Hopefully, we will not have to cancel all the camps, but we'll certainly make sure that it is brought to the board's attention for a vote and decision on all of that. We also are wanting, we believe, we would like to get more visitations and more revenue out of our pools. And as already has been mentioned, Lake Thoreau obviously is going to be shut down. And then it's also going to be Shadowwood and Tall Oaks because of some of the work that Chris has to do. So we're looking to get some additional revenue and more activity at our 12 remaining pools that'll be open. So we have actually proposed to lower the cost for non-members, people outside the community that buy a family pass. We've proposed to drop that at about $100 in order to see if we can't drive more interest in that and generate about 200 more families to become members. And that's the highlights of where we are. And I think, as you can see I can answer any specific questions you might have for line items, but that's the gist of the adjustments we've made for 2021 and why we can bring the budget in the way we're doing right now. And I can answer any questions or field any comments. And Dave, I think Dave Kerr's on the line. I think Dave and the fiscal committee, and I would concur with Bob, they're doing a really wonderful job helping us think our way through all of this. And there was some discussion last night around what happens if we leave the assessment at where it is right now. What are some of the projected issues we're going to be facing in 2022? One of which has to do with our lease agreement on this building. And while we took some discounts initially, the lease, I think, on expense for this building is going up several $100,000. Additionally, the deferral of what was the second phase of the Archer recommendations come up for consideration in the 2022 budget, as would presumably any sort of merit pay increase. When you look at those and then you add in all the capital concerns that we have going forward over the next 5 to 10 years, Dave and the fiscal committee suggested that it would be a mistake if we left assessments flat. In fact, they were recommending increasing assessments so that, and there's precedents in past years where the board has elected, because we've had a surplus, to either keep assessments flat or to reduce them. But then you have to play catch up down the road. It's not something that you're going to solve this problem, this challenge, I should say, with expenses going up. They just do. And especially as you start to look at the capital issue we're going to be facing. So I'll leave it to Dave, Dave and maybe Bob to comment a little bit about what the fiscal committee thought about what we shared and about the assessment. So
I'll jump in first. I think two of the points that I was going to make, Hank just addressed, and those are as we move forward into 21 and 2022, we're going to feel the full effect of the lease that we signed. Heretofore, we've enjoyed a really great negotiation, but at the end of the day, the total minimum required payments for the lease that is now running out to 2030, June 30th of 2030, is a little over $10 million. So when you consider that we have been able to enjoy about 8 months of no rental this year, and then we will get some benefit next year. When we get into 2022 and forward, we're going to be paying $800,000 to $900,000 a year in rental that we've now been averaging between $200,000 and $400,000. So we're going to see big changes in rental expense.
And that's because we had done some negotiations to get what I would call discounts or accommodations early, right?
Right. It's
early.
Yes. You were Tony and Kathy Baum were able to negotiate a tenant improvement allowance and extend the term over which we could take advantage of that. Plus, any money that we didn't use for tenant improvements would go to reduce the rent. So at some point, that money's going to run out and we're going to have to pay the full rent, the full boat, as they say.
Right.
The other issue is the impact, financial impact. And I think it's important to repeat it, that if we fully implement the Archer report, we're talking $1 million initially, if I read the notes correctly, and then we will, be working off a higher base from that point forward. Number two. Third, in increasing non-assessment revenue, this is a personal bugaboo with me, is that it has to be at least if we increase revenue, it has to be at least expense neutral. In other words, it's either got to cost us no net money, we make as much as we expend, or we make money, because if we continue to operate with services, and this is the decision that the board will make, it's just my opinion as an individual. If we offer services that continue to lose money at increasing rates, the only way that we can meet the obligations that we have is to increase the assessment, borrow money, or a combination of the two. So I hate to be a doggy downer, but that's the reality as we move forward. And the point that one last point, the point that John Farrell made at the outset about encouraging, in fact, beyond encouraging, really forcefully pushing the county to push new development into Reston Association as new members, even if it is at a lower rate than others, would be a substantial improvement in the membership base, because our membership base is just not growing fast enough to accommodate the increases in costs that we will incur over the coming decades.
So, Mike, did you wish to ask a question before we go over to David Kerr to see if he'd like to share anything?
Yeah, I would. Thanks. Thank you, Julie. And sorry for being in and out earlier, folks. I know it's disruptive. But anyway, Hank, my question is on the decision not to implement phase 2 of the Archer report recommendations. I'm wondering how you're feeling about that. To me, it seems like continuing to invest in our staff is a prudent thing to do. I mean, the whole reason we have these recommendations is that we were losing staff over salary issues. And I think, as Bob said earlier, these are not going to go away. If we don't do this maintenance now, we could lose people in the future. And that's just my gut reaction, not knowing what your day-to-day management of things is. So I'd love to hear your reaction, your thoughts on that, or whether you think it'd be worth adding something to the assessment to make it happen.
I think those board members that hired me and worked with me last year know that I'm very, very proud of this staff, and I'm an advocate of this staff. I described them as probably one of the best staffs I've worked with in my entire career.
Oh, and Hank, can I just interrupt you 1 second?
Yes.
I don't want to suggest that I thought you made it in any kind of cold-hearted way or in a unsound way. It was just a reaction that I had. Thank you.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. I will tell you that I think in the current environment that all of us as citizens of the United States, all of us that live in Fairfax County, all of us that are in Reston are facing, I don't think it's the right thing to do right now. I just don't. And I've talked it over with the senior staff, and everyone's in agreement that it would send there's a lot of folks in the community that are struggling. Some folks are seeing their work hours go down. And all of us are being affected by it. I just think the optics of it are wrong. I also don't think it's the right thing to do in 2021. I do believe that the report, one, was initiated by the board, two, was approved by the board, and needs to be kept in focus as we go into 2022 if the circumstances are different. I'm hopeful that I don't want to talk about COVID much longer into 2022. It's killing us. I mean, it's and literally it is killing us, but it's just very, very hard to run a business like this or an organization. But I think this is the right thing to do, and so did the senior team. And to be honest with you, as a testament to this staff, I have not had any staff member come back to me and say, "I'm really upset with you, Hank, for doing this." And it's quite the opposite. They also agree. They think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Hi, this is Ben. I have some comments to share. So
after David Kerr speaks.
what is it?
Did you wish to make them before David Kerr makes any comments he wanted to share? From fiscal?
Yes, I would like to make them now.
Okay, fine.
Okay. So, I mean, Hank is the only CEO that I know, and in all the organizations that we hear today about how they're affected by COVID, to not make any changes to headcount, to not make any significant changes to headcount when you know this is an organization that is affected by COVID. So what I would like to see is a comprehensive revision of personnel expenses, of employee expenses, direct and indirect, and that's the big ticket item. I mean, we saw tiny ticket items that are not going to make any material impact to our budget over the next 10 years. I say 10 years because we have 10 pools and many other facilities that are going to come under serious maintenance issues that we've seen to the tune of $30 million. And if we're going to have to address what we are going to face in the next 10 years, then it is by addressing the big ticket item, which is employee expenses. And for our organization, we're at 60, 70%. We have to do a proper assessment in order to find out what it is exactly. Look, in the last 20 years, we have probably added 4,000 members. It's a very tiny amount, and we have not increased on our services, but our headcount has gone up year over year. I would, in fact, like to see the opposite of the Archer report. I'd like to see an organization come in and audit our headcount to see what is it that the headcount is doing? How busy are they? How productive are they? I mean, I'll be honest, I just heard the communications team report. I think we spend $1 million on the communication team. I didn't see anything productive come out of that. We're talking about Facebook likes and we're talking about social media interaction when we have less than 5,000 members combined in all our social media accounts. We have 22,000 members and 60,000 residents in Reston. We should have seen tens of thousands of engagement in social media. So that's not happening. So I really would want to see something comprehensive over the next 10 years come out, or us to ask for a reverse of what the Archer study was, which is to come in and audit our headcount and see how productive they are, how efficient they are, because what it is really doing is it's really stealing money away from what the members are paying for our services, for the facilities. And now we've gone bankrupt in that regard because we don't have $30 million to pay for it over the next 10 years. But our headcount has gone up, and we have not even ever seriously talked about cutting down our expenses in that manner.
All right, Ben, thank you. David Kerr, did you wish to make any comments from your fiscal meeting and to the board? Thank you.
You're on mute, Dave.
You're on mute. You have to hit your mute button. Sorry.
I am now allowed to. I wasn't allowed to unmute myself. Okay. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't got a lot to add. I think most of it's been said. I did send out a note that I tried to, consolidate our thoughts on. But I'll play this card that I'll agree with everybody, specifically Mike and Hank, because I think what they're both saying is consistent. Okay. Our people should be paid. Okay. I mean, if the board wants to go back and address these phases, that's the board decision, but people ought to get paid. Okay. But as Hank said, I mean, and even as Ven has kind of mentioned, a lot of businesses have laid people off, cut people's pay, done some drastic things to keep going. We've been very successful in keeping people hired and keeping them at full pay. So taking kind of a year off, if you would, isn't a bad idea when you face what we're facing in just trying to make ends meet during the year of 2020. So, but anyway, my note out to the board that the fiscal committee all agreed on last night was trying to address this problem. We have expenses coming up on us, specifically in salaries, specifically in lease and in capital, that most, if not all, have to be done. And to hold it at 708 this year, I mean, we're just going to make it hurt a lot more next year. And so, I would just, as a member holding the rate for people under COVID, I'm all for it. As a financial person looking at what's ahead of us, I don't think we should do it. So I'm torn like that. I'll play the middle of the road. But again, I think there's some things we can do. And maybe we can take some time, maybe we can get involved with some of the staff and over the next few weeks, work out some alternatives to what can happen I think we can even do some things with salaries that, again, don't go to salaries, but maybe gets preserved within our assessment so that we don't have the bigger problem next year. But we've got to find a way to smooth this out somehow.
David, I believe your committee did take a vote and supported the recommendation of increasing from 708. Am I correct on that?
Yes, they thought that the prudent thing to do was not to hold at 708. That specifically with the lease in front of us, that's a real thing that we can't not pay that one. Okay. Hank's making some tough decisions on salaries, but on some things we can't make decisions on ourselves. So we just think that at minimum, we ought to, well, we voted to say at maximum a $20 increase. And somewhere around there would help us at least smooth us into 2022.
All right. I do have a question that I've been holding, and then I'll see if anybody else wants to comment. One of the things that, Hank, you presented in this budget had to do with fees for recreation passes, non-member recreation passes, particularly some proposed reductions for non-member with regard to, I think, tennis and pickleball. And I'd like to get some insight further to why you all are recommending that direction when, in my mind, knowing we have such a treasured asset and interest in the community to use those, why we would not be looking at increasing the fees for such usage. And I know that you and Laura and Larry have done some extensive thought on that, but I'm beginning to see signs of stuck on the streets about indoor pickleball. Come on over to Chantilly, and I hate seeing somebody say go someplace other than Reston. I want everyone to stay here and enjoy what we have. So can you?
Yeah, I think, just to that specific point, Julia, that you're bringing up, I think there's an opportunity cost that we're losing because of how we're structured financially and the current assets that we have to repair and maintain. We can't build, for example, an indoor right now. We don't have the means of going out and building an indoor pickleball court. And pickleball is becoming exceedingly popular. It's the one thing that's growing. What we have recommended has to do with swimming with the pools, and primarily the pool pass. We have seen attendance, we call visitation, the number of people that are visiting the pools over the last 10 years consistently decrease. These are ballpark numbers. I don't have the exact statistics in front of me for this meeting, but roughly 10 years ago, we were having 200,000 visits to our 15 pools. In 2019, really the last legitimate year, we had just slightly more than 110,000 visits. That doesn't mean it's 110,000 people. It means we had a certain number of people that bought passes and went to our pools, all of them 110,000 times. That's a pretty substantial decrease in 10 years. And also during that 10-year time frame, you've seen a lot of development taking place in the TSA. They all have a lot of their own amenities. You've seen growth for Fairfax County pools and amenities, including some really cool things that are going on with their swimming pools, which we're not really able to do. So what we were thinking about was that we would like to grow revenue, because non-assessment revenue is one of the things we can do in the immediate time frame. Going after proffers and all that, I'm in total agreement. And I was very interested. I took lots of notes in both the listening session and this evening. But in the near term, how do we grow non-assessment revenue? We have the pools and they're underutilized, meaning we have capacity. And so the thought was, and the price for our members is already very incredibly low, but we thought, who wants to use pools the most, which are families? Is there a way, if we drop the price, that we might be able to drive or encourage more families that are non-members to come and buy season passes to our pools? Their current price is $550 for a family. For what we call an all-access recreation pass. We were suggesting dropping that to $450, dropping it $100, and seeing if we couldn't generate another 200 families to come and join. And we've actually are increasing price for non-members on pickleball by about $10. But the one thing we were suggesting is the all access pass for families that are not RA members, to see if we could encourage more people to come and take advantage of it. Because that's a high number. That number generates significant profit for us. Because the pools are the pools. We say they're going to be open, they're staffed, and they cost us what they cost us. So getting more people to come and paying it the higher price would be a way to help. That's the thought behind it.
All right, follow-on question to that. I hope Sarah will smile at this one, but you know, in July, we have in past been offered a discount on recreation passes for non-members. Is that factored into this budget as well?
If we go this route, we would not be offering a discount in July.
Okay, thank you.
But again, it's the board's, all these things I've shared with you, and I'm really, I'm a bit surprised no one's brought up the mowing. And I'm only smiling and only commenting because I'd only been here about 3 months in 2019 when VDOT was not offering the contract. The contract had run out, and we were really trying very hard to get it. But because we didn't have the contract, legally, we could not go and mow the median strips. And I was getting phone calls, like unbelievable phone calls. Why is the grass so high in the median strip? And I kept asking, and it took me a while to kind of, I was new to the job, trying to figure out why are we doing it this way? And I understand why we do it that way. But that, I think, is an issue the board has to decide. It would save us a significant amount of money. We are a biophilic community. I think there's some other alternatives down the road that we should probably start thinking seriously about the median strips if we can negotiate with VDOT. For example, making them a habitat for wildlife, with wildflowers and nectar plants for butterflies and host plants where they can lay their eggs. Make it really quite lovely. And then you don't have to mow it. You just have to kind of maintain it. But it's not our decision. It's VDOT's decision. But they only pay us to mow it 3 times. We mow it 24 times. I'm suggesting we're only going to mow it 8 times. So the grass will get a little bit higher. But and I'm the one who's going to get the phone calls, but you will get the emails, is what I'm suggesting. So
and we did, yeah.
That's another decision point.
Okay, I appreciate those answers. Sarah, do you have a comment before I go to Karen?
I have a few piling up, so I'd let Karen go first.
All right, go ahead, Karen.
Okay, because this is about the mowing, and I did have a question about that. I mean, if we were to increase assessments, and I understand the reason for that is to help deal with 2022 issues, but could we maybe bump that 8 times up a little bit?
Yes, we certainly could. So yes, we'll do what the membership wants us to do and what the board directs us to do. But I think I just to throw this out as something to think about. If we are going to claim to be a biophilic community, I think there's some things we need to think about where, like, how much grass do we want to mow?
Right.
Is that the right thing to do? Should we be planting more trees? Should we be putting some of our money to plant, several thousand trees that are going, as Doug Britt has shared with us, as our climate gets warmer, some of the trees that we have here aren't going to survive. So we should be planting other trees that will, so that, and I had when I was at a fundraising gentleman I used to go and ask for money from, and he was an investment banker, and his famous quote to me was, "Hank, when was the best time to plant a tree?" And the first time he asked me, and being a horticulturist, I thought I had the answer. I said, "Springtime." And he said, "No, 20 years ago." So the truth is, we should be planting more and more trees now, so that 20 years from now, as more of our trees are declining because of, global warming, the temperature, that we still have them in place. So that's my only pushback a little bit on mowing the grass in the medians. So
I would
So
support.
we should talk about pursuing that. I totally agree, Hank.
Yeah, and I personally would not vote for mowing more than the 8 that he's projected. I know that, as you said, the biophilic, and also, we've been pursuing some grants and just recently did get a grant from the Virginia Trees for Clean Water program that Claudia had helped put in for us, and we're getting some money to put some shrubbery and plants down at I think Barton Hill. So there's ways to also look to support the biophilic. And now I believe it's Sarah.
Mhm.
Sarah, your turn.
Thank you. I have 3 points that I've been adding up and I'd like to address. First one, a huge thanks to Hank. I love that the changes you've made, you've been cognizant of what's going on around both Reston, Northern Virginia, and across the world with COVID and all of the changes happening. Thank you so much for working on the budget. I won't get into the 708 or more than 708. I think everyone here knows where I stand on that issue. I just wanted to make one statement when we're talking about the payroll. I think John put a beautiful memo together and he, I think, listed, we're at 67.5% at the moment, payroll compared to operating expenses. And if the rate we're going in 2021, we would be sort of 73.9%. And just that track is not sustainable, and we have to look at other ways to address it. And I think I love Dave's suggestion, if fiscal can help us to think of creative ways to address it so that we don't, we find different ways to address it and not just the assessments to be the answer. That said, I have one more comment about the pools. Hank, you already know, I loved hearing that we're not doing the discount, but we're doing a discounted pool pass. That's fantastic. One of the things, if we could explore, I know, Julie, you talked about the one Reston when we started today. If we could offer something for our members, which works with the RCC facilities, sort of a combined pass, that might encourage more members. I don't know if they'll be open to working with us. The second, if we could do simple outreach efforts to encourage more of our members to buy the passes. Instead of an opt-in, if we could make it an opt-out when they're paying their dues. I think something small like that, or a 30-day free trial, something to remind our people that, hey, we have pools and we have really good pools right here. By really good, I'm talking about Glade, closer to me, not Shadowwood, but I'm sure one day Shadowwood will be great too. Those are my few thoughts. Thank you.
What?
Thank you, Sarah. I can tell you, we are talking to RCC about some of the pools and some of the things we could do with them. We had a good meeting, and I'll look into opting out. I believe there is some issues associated with opting out that either are legal or there's something going on with that. I don't remember right off the top of my head, but we'll get back to you on that as well.
Okay, Mike, while I quiet my dogs.
Thanks. I have 2 questions. First one will be for David and then for Hank. But David, I really appreciate your comments about not kicking our fiscal problems down the road by imposing, frankly, an artificial cap on the assessment. I'm wondering if fiscal thought that there were things that we need to be spending more on let me back up. Let's say we increased by $20. Was fiscal thinking that we should spend that, whatever it is, $450,000 on something specific for 2021 in terms of investments or maintenance or the like? Or were they thinking that we should take that and bank it because we're going to need it later?
Dave's muted again.
Thank you. Okay, I'm unmuted. Yes, well, specifically right now, one of the things that we would recommend is the lease. We would put in the full amount of a 10-year average on the lease. And that would raise it, I think Tom Deal told us last night, it'd be about $21 if we did that.
Got it. And why that? Why is that the thing you'd pick?
That is a real expense in 22, whether we like it or not.
Okay.
We're gonna, we have to pay them something like, I'll get it wrong, but I'll be close, $922,000 in 22.
I see.
And we're paying $450 in 21. We paid $200 in 20.
Okay, got it. So this would be just front loading that expense, or why make it now, David? That's how I'm trying to understand.
Well, yeah, in some fairness to us, we've been asking to do this for the last couple of years.
I wasn't here, sorry.
See, the problem with a lease, okay, is that they're always front loaded with benefits. So you have, it's really no different than capital projects. Okay, we do a 10-year average to fund capital projects so that we take out the up and down on the assessment. We do an average to try to not force the assessment up and down. Well, the lease is the same thing. It gets very front loaded with benefits. And so one way to prevent that from happening to the assessment is you take the 10-year average and use that to create your assessment every year.
Okay, got it.
We could have done it last year.
Understood.
But we elected to take the lower number.
Got it.
And I understand why people do it, but it financially, it's a much more conservative thing to take the 10-year average each year.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Good. And relating question to Hank. Hank, let's say we did add another $20 to the assessment this year. What would you do with it? What would be the things that you'd really would like to have been able to do this year? And I agree with you, by the way, that the optics of raising everyone's salaries are not good. So I'm assuming you're not going to pick that.
No. I'm Dave and the fiscal committee and I are on the same page. We've got some serious challenges facing us going forward, and Bob expressed it very, very clearly. We have an aging infrastructure. I do not believe, as I said before, other HOAs, other communities like Columbia, for example, they have gone into significant amount. They use financing to pay for a lot of things, but a lot of the new amenities they've added are things that generate profits. I mean, generate non-assessment revenue profit that gets pushed back into their organization. We have old swimming pools. They're beautiful, but they're old and they don't have a lot of the nice features. They can only be used 3 to 4 months out of the year. We have incredible tennis facilities, but none of them are indoor. We have no indoor fitness center. We don't have any of the new things that other communities have. I believe that we need to really pay very close attention to what we're hearing from the fiscal committee, from Dave and Bob, about we need to fix what we need to fix. We may need to have fewer swimming pools. I don't know what the number is, but we need to have fewer. And the ones that we improve need to be state of the art when we improve them. And I believe we need the option. I call it opportunity costs. I believe that there's some amenities that our community would want us to have if they were asked. And we need the opportunity to do that and give them, because we have old swimming pools and old tennis courts. And that's all we have. And we have beautiful parks. I mean, I don't mean to discredit. We have beautiful parks. We have wonderful trails. I love it. But if you're asking how we're going to make new non-assessment revenue from it, that's going to be the hard part. It's really going to take getting sponsors.
And I was thinking more short term than that.
Short term, I would do exactly what Dave is suggesting. Exactly what he's suggesting.
And I agree with everything else you said. I agree with everything else, but short term, you do the least thing.
Yeah, we have a lease issue that we're faced with. It was when Dave said it only cost us $200,000 in 2019. That was the discount, by the way. We paid a lot more the previous years, but when the lease got renewed, we got the discount, we got the upfront discount, we got the leasehold improvements, but then you've got the funding that the cost that's coming down a little bit more than what it normally was. And so Dave's spot on. We need to address the lease.
Okay. All right. Thank you both.
Other questions or comments to Hank and Bob and Dave on the proposed budget, the draft number 3?
I'll just make one last comment, which is going to be very redundant. We are at the beginning of a different paradigm of operation, and we have to prepare for it. If we don't, we're going to face not just $20 increases a year, it's going to be substantially more for the same amenities. And I agree with Hank. As we make decisions, we shouldn't do so solely based on cost. They should be state-of-the-art things that people will slather to use. If that means we have 10 pools instead of 15, so be it.
That's right. At some point, you can't kick the can down the road any longer, and you've got to be able to provide amenities that your membership's willing to pay for. Mike Collins, you want?
Hi, Julie, just point of order. What's the next step with the budget? I'm assuming that if we want to see any changes to this draft, now is the time to speak up, because the next time we meet, where it's going to be a thumbs up or thumbs down situation.
The next action is we go ahead with the draft 3. I think we made one change to it thus far that I heard tonight with the ADA, but the next version we see will be at our public hearing on November 4th for comments and whatever other additional questions we all might wish to ask. As a result of the public hearing, then we'll see one on November 19th for approval.
Okay, got it.
Assessment rate.
Got it. Okay, thank you for reminding me of the process. Then I'd be interested in hearing from other board members about this issue of what to do with this lease. I would be in favor of accepting fiscal committee's proposal to increase sufficient enough to cover the lease as David just described. I mean, we're going to pay this eventually, and we're going to end up adding even more to people's assessments later on if we don't do it now. We need to get people used to this glide path of higher assessments, because that's what's going to happen with our capital situation going forward. I don't care what we do with non-assessment revenue, it is going to hit the assessment at some point. And as much as I hate to do it, given COVID times, I just don't see another way. And I think we're trying to make ourselves look good and feel good over $20 a year. And I don't think that's a good idea. Sorry, I got more on a soapbox than I intended to. Sorry about that.
John Mooney?
Like Mike, I'm sobered by David's report from the fiscal committee meeting, and I too have mentioned earlier that I am always wary of artificially keeping down assessments, and it looks to me like we have absolutely unavoidable increases coming, and I, for a second person, along with Mike, would favor considering a higher assessment rate for 2021. I think that we may come to a point, and indeed the Recreation Facilities Working Group is working on one angle of that, where we might have to curtail the services that we offer. You know, we may not be able to offer all the services. We may have to reduce our service mix, but not in a way to make it attractive, as you mentioned, Bob. But we might have to curtail other service expenses in order to survive. And obviously, we will keep trying to find new and creative ways to increase revenues. But in the short term, we are facing a crunch, and I think the responsible thing is to consider an increase in the assessment rate for 2021.
I would follow on, John, to your comments that, you know, it may also be that the mix of services that we provide changes somewhat. For example, you know, a facility that provides fountains as opposed to, or sprinklers as opposed to an actual pool requires different levels of staffing. Pickleball or a volleyball court in place of a pool requires a different level of whatever. So I think that we all are anxiously waiting to hear some insights and input from the recreational facilities in terms of the changing demographics and needs and desires. But I also believe that we do need to increase our assessment. I think that we are still well below what we, in theory, would be authorized to do. And I don't think that we're at the point of being able to say to our population at hand, if would you be willing to pay an additional, you know, $20 a year so that you have that we don't lose any of the 15 pools that you can currently walk to, or whatever.
I calculated that if we stay at 708 for 2021, the average annual assessment increase for 2019, 2020, and 2021 will be only 1.26%. That's the annual increase. The CPIU has been on average, I think somewhere I have it here, 2.2%, 2.1%. So or at least those 3 years, 19, 20, and 21 would be under the CPIU. And we have tried tricks like this before to, shame on me, I shouldn't say trick. We have tried to ease the burden for our members by artificially reducing our rates. And we did that, and in the document I sent you all, you saw it, we did it in 2017 and 2018. And it's artificial, you know, we're paying with resources from elsewhere. Ideally, what we would do is our assessment would cover our real assessment would cover our real costs. And when we try to hedge on that relationship between real revenues and real costs, we get ourselves in long-term trouble.
Karen, and then Aaron.
So I think I heard from either Dave or Hank a short time ago that we would need to increase the assessment by $21 in order to implement the lease increase in 2021. Did I hear that correctly? To cover.
I think what fiscal has asked for or suggested was no more than $20.
Right. And Tom had said it would take 21 to cover it.
Yeah, I think it's there's a little bit more calculations we could do on it, but
we'll find the dollar. No problem.
Yeah.
We'll find the dollar. But yeah. So if we went below the $20, it would be a problem to cover this, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think there's some things that we can look at. I mean, there are little opportunities here and there. Okay. I mean, you know, you can utilize some cash if you think you have cash, but you know, you have to do some analysis on it. You have to be sure, because some of these things that took place a few years ago, you know, most of them are done with the true intent that we were utilizing cash in a good way, and maybe we weren't. Okay. So it's not as easy to say, oh, we'll just take it out of cash or something, but there's some things we can do. And if we have a number that the board feels they're comfortable with, we can offer up some suggestions on how to make that work.
Thanks.
Hi, this is Ben. So I was in that lease negotiation committee, and
Ben, I believe the next person was Aaron, and then we'll go to you.
Okay.
Thank you. As we've been discussing these things, and also coupled with the earlier discussion tonight about the automatic doors, what comes to mind to me is, now this isn't a purely mathematical exercise. We aren't trying to minimize a number. We're trying to balance several things. And one of the things that we have to balance, and that maybe not be directly in the forefront of our minds right now, but is probably driving a lot of our feelings, is the way that we spend the assessments that the members pay into Reston Association determines what Reston Association is, what kind of an organization it is. I do believe we are the kind of organization that has automatic door openers on our facilities, so that it is convenient and accessible and welcoming to everyone. We don't have the cheapest door to minimize our spend, and then thinking along those lines has brought me to think about some of the comments that you made, Director Mooney, about funding and how we fund some of these big things that are coming our way. And so I wanted to talk briefly, if I could, about the idea of generational equity, and the idea of borrowing funds to cover purchases, so that the beneficiaries of those large purchases are the ones that get to pay for those as well. It is a neat concept, but I'm not sure that's Reston. I am definitely the beneficiary of those that lived in my house before me, and the work that they have done, and those that have been before us here in Reston, and I'm sure we have some members listening that are some of the originals, and they're the ones that laid the foundation and paid a higher cost than we're currently paying, to lay some great benefits that we take, and so we pay for those in our assessment, and we maintain the feeling of what is Reston. So those will be interesting discussions when we get there, and we get to the point where we have these large outlays, and how we do it. I would like to see a mix of funding for both of them. I was a little disappointed when we're looking at the Lake Thoreau, and we're looking at kind of these two options, and one of them was more expensive than the other, and both of them were more expensive than our replacement study had outlined. I would have preferred that we all were kind of drawn to the one that was, in essence, more expensive, but was a little bit more Reston-y, right? It maybe had a more interesting architectural appeal to it. It maybe offered some upgraded amenities and those sorts of things, and finding that balance as we do these things in our discussions. So I also would support at this point, following the recommendations and raising our assessment by $1 or $2 or maybe even $3 a month, next year, to take some of the bumps out of the road and start to have larger funds available so that we can, when we're looking at replacing these amenities that are aging, that we can replace them in style, and produce a Reston that is not the, well, what's the cheapest we can replace this pool for, but what is the right feeling that we can put in, right kind of amenity. So those are where my thoughts are going on this one. I thought I would share. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ben, please.
Yeah, I really, I find it strange you stop me mid-sentence in order to maintain the order in which directors should speak, but you definitely do not correct somebody when they're speaking foul language in your meeting and you don't once have anything to say, or the other directors. So, but that's okay. I've always performed well, even though if things don't hand out fairly to me. So I'm used to that. I think there's a lot of feel-good comments that are being made over here about, you know, like, oh, how can we try to add to revenue? Maybe we'll have pickleball. Well, you know, yeah, that'll add hundreds of dollars to our revenue, or for the price of so many dollars, you know, maybe if you don't have your favorite Starbucks coffee every day, you can pay for the assessments. These are all feel-good comments while you make, and while you say that you want to increase the assessments, but really, you talk about closing pools. You're not going to close pools. Look at, we didn't even have Lake Thoreau in our agenda, and now we are firing on all cylinders, making that our core focus of fixing Lake Thoreau while we sideline all our other projects. And that same thing is going to happen when the other pools are going to come up, because this board or future boards, they are going to yield to public pressure, or they just do not know how to make the hard decisions. And you need to have the ability to make the hard decision. If you can't make those hard decisions, why not make them now? But you're not, and that's going to be the continued manner in which how things are going to go for the next 10 years, where you spend $30 million for 10 pools, and we are going to be left holding the bag, or future generations are going to. I was going to say about the lease, when we negotiated it, I was in the committee, and we got $250,000 towards facility improvements, as well as overall in net, we were going to have a really good deal by doing that. We have to see where those monies went. Was $250,000. You know, it has to be compensated somewhere else. And I do not remember, while making those negotiations, ever thinking that we're going to have this discussion at a later time, where we're going to have to figure out how to pay for lease increases, because it was never a lease increase. It was going to be a bunch of money we were going to get upfront, or a better deal. I have to go through my notes into what exactly happened, but that's the thing, that money went somewhere and we don't know where it went. It probably got either into our operating surplus, or categorized into something else but under lease.
Yes, thank you, Ben. I understand my mic is still very soft. I'm going to try to talk louder. I can't figure out what's changed since any other meeting. But the one thing, Ben, I want to note is, because I cannot see your video, you don't have your video on, I can't see when you wish to speak and raise your hand. So I'm doing the best I can to make sure we include you. But that, your choice to not have your video on does cause me a bit of a problem. So I'm almost yelling, but I don't mean to yell. I don't mean to sound angry, but I'm trying to speak really loudly. Tom, I see you'd like to speak.
Yeah, I'd just like to give my 2 cents. I appreciate Dave's input and Hank as well. I think it's just apparent, you know, after listening to what they've said and some of the stuff I've been reading, that
Tom, could you lean in closer to your microphone?
Any better? Am I like Julie now? No one can hear me? All right, I guess I don't have anything to say.
No, I'm sorry. No, it's for me, it's a little muffled. I don't know about the rest.
Can anybody else hear me?
It's
I can
better.
hear you now.
Okay.
We can hear, we also see your vest and not your face.
There you go. I'll be right up against the microphone. What I basically was just saying, I think we do have to raise our dues, and it's either we can spread it out or we can do it as of next year. And I think, you know, whatever we can do to make it less painful for the members, because if we're going to have to raise it, I think one big chunk is much harder to accept. Before we do that, though, I think we really need to ask the physical committee and the staff to provide us with a report showing us why and how much we do need to raise the dues by. And I believe the same thing with what John Mooney outlined in his report, which was financing, how we should look at that option. We're at that position where we have to do something. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Madam, I'm sorry, Bob wants to talk.
That's right.
I wanted to say, I agree with all the discussion that we've had. In order for fiscal, or for that matter, staff to be able to look at alternative approaches to how we meet funding over time, we need more, we need as good a numbers as we possibly can get, and better than we've gotten to date. And this is not a criticism, but I understand it is, a lot of it is, anytime you project numbers, you know, the projections are only as good as the assumptions that you have. But we have to make every possible effort to do so. The problem that we're running up against, particularly this year, is we've got less than a month, you know, or just about a month to get this lockdown for 2021. So we've got a lot of work to do between now and the next board meeting. There will be the public hearing. There will be a fiscal committee meeting, which I would strongly encourage all directors to listen in on. And then the 19th of November meeting.
Correct. And I believe one of the things that fiscal mentioned last night, and David, you can confirm this, is some discussion about coming to the board and offering up a desire to do some additional analysis and review, but with the support of the board to do so. So that was something I believe that you and Bob and I were going to follow up with staff to see how that might be couched. So.
Madam President, I would like to make a motion that we direct the CEO in collaboration with fiscal committee to present to the board for its November 19th meeting an assessment scenario with a rate of $728, and with an indication about how we would apply those how we would use those revenues to position ourselves for the coming costs in near out years.
Is there a second to John's motion?
Okay.
Mike Collins, second. Any discussion about the motion? Sarah?
Since we're going down this road, can we also ask Hank maybe or fiscal to come back with, if we waived the $25 fee that we charge for monthly payment options? I don't think we do monthly. Do we do quarterly? But there is a fee attached to the payment options. If we could, at least for next year, consider waiving it.
Like that as a second.
That's fine to include as part of my motion as one of the things we would like studied.
Hi, this is Van.
That sounds like a different motion. I have no argument against it, Sarah, but it sounds like a different motion. Maybe you want to make it after we deal with this one?
Mike, I don't consider it in opposition to my motion,
No.
but simply adding the other information that we would request the manager to generate.
Well, except that, John, I loved your motion, by the way, but it's on the table and it's seconded, and you need to start over or have a separate vote. That's all.
Right.
Got it.
Okay.
Hi, this is Van. I have a question. So if the motion is to, it seems like a well-drafted, well-rehearsed that go and come back with a draft of $728 so it can be voted yay or nay. And from all the comments I hear, I think that's what is going to happen in the next board meeting. So are there any alternatives, or what is the work that's going to be done between now and then on the draft? Or is it for all substantial reasons, it looks like we're almost agreeing to the budget being what it is and 728 today instead of the next budget session. So what is the work that we're going to do between now and the next board meeting in order to see what we can do better about the budget? Or is there not? And what is the intention is what I would like to know.
I, for one, haven't supported going to 728, but that's Julie. I'd like to see a 720 number, but anyone wish to comment? Because I kind of have the same question that Ben just asked.
I think I agree with Tom when he said fiscal wanted to do a deeper dive and need the information. So I'm assuming they'll come back with those. And we still get to decide if we're voting yay or nay. Am I right?
But if you vote nay, we don't have any other alternative. There's not going to be a scenario 2 and scenario 3 with a 720, with a 708, with maybe less. I mean, it looks like we still have time before we approve the budget. We are not approving the budget or setting it in stone today. So we should look at all the other options too.
Correct. So you're saying don't be tied to the 7 to 8 number. Is that Ben?
That is right, because I do not see any other alternative if that's a yay or nay. If it's a nay, then what else do we got? And we have to pass the budget that day.
I have a question of Hank, Tom, Larry, David Kerr, Bob. Are you comfortable with what's being asked in the motion from Mr. Mooney?
Go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say, if it is, I agree with Ben's conclusion that if it is to get to a 728 number, then all we're really looking at is where are we going to put the extra money? I think, as Ben suggests, we should, as we have begun to do, look at a range of possibilities that we can vet over the next couple of weeks, and have fiscal make a recommendation of the alternatives at its meeting, which then the board can act on, rather than to, have a predetermined answer.
Hank?
That make sense?
Yeah, I was just simply going to say we're not. I think a couple things need to be made pretty clear. We laid off 287 people last year. Okay, that's the staff that would have worked. We did not hire them. So to state that we didn't let people go is not really fair. We're also bringing in the 2020 budget like no other company I know of with a surplus. We've lost $2 million worth of revenue, and we're still bringing a surplus in at the end of this year. So I think the staff needs to be commended. And if you look at the reductions from the original 2021 budget to the budget you're seeing in front of you right now, it's a 10% cut from what was voted on at the last year when we put the 2021 budget together. When it comes to the the suggestion you're making right now to increase assessments by roughly $20, I am not looking for adding anything back that I've already told you about. I'm not going to come back and say we're going to give raises. I'm not going to come back and say any of those things. What we're going to come back and say is, this is how we can cover the lease agreement, and this is how much we can put aside for capital. So I'm going to tell you flat out right now, that's what's going to happen. And Dave Dave and the fiscal committee can help us look at some things a little bit differently. But I think it needs to be really kept in focus. 287 people did not work for us in 2021 that were scheduled to work for, or 2020 that worked for us in 2019. Yeah.
John?
And I would add to what Hank just said, between version 1 and the version we received for tonight's meeting, he reduced expenses by 1.8 million. And he did so, a full 57% of that 1.8 million came from reduction in salaries and other employee expenses. So that's how we got there.
Hold on, guys. You guys are using numbers. Those 287 folks were for camps and for whatever seasonal employees. There were no camps, hence there are no seasonal employees. We're talking about the over 100 FTEs, full-time folks, that we need to audit and see if they are at all performing as what they're expected to. These numbers, you're just throwing numbers over there. It's like saying I saved $1 million by not having Starbucks for the last 10 years. This is not material. I mean, give our membership honest numbers. Just don't put out numbers over there that's going to mislead our membership.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, the number I gave you on the savings was from full-time salaries. Pardon me, full-time salary costs of full-time folks was $900,000 of the 101.03 million.
287 full-time people you let go? I don't understand what you're saying.
No, what I'm saying is that the 1.03 million in personnel cost savings came primarily from FTEs, not from seasonal people.
How could you have done that? You didn't let anybody go.
Because Hank reduced, he eliminated phase 2 of the Archer report, which is $445,000. He cut out the merit pay increases for this year and some other things that are related to those salaries.
How would you give yourself a pay raise when you're not making money in the organization, John?
You've changed the question.
I'm not. I'm just asking you a straight up question. If you were the CEO, or if this was your money invested in an organization and you didn't have any revenue, would you pay yourself a bonus? You would not. So this is the membership money, and you have no problem in raising assessments and charging the members because they have no other option but to pay it up. And you're on the board making this critical decision.
Right. Again, you were arguing earlier, then, that we were counting seasonal employees in this, and my point is most of that money came from full-time salaried employees, and they are taking a hit this year to help balance our budget, and I think they did so realizing that the COVID issue the COVID crisis was a hard issue, and they are willing to bear a significant part of the burden.
That's a false argument, John. You know that too.
No,
right.
I don't.
Let's get back to the discussion on the motion at hand. John, would you like to restate that so that we might determine?
I will withdraw my motion if the seconder, and I will because what Bob wants to do is to make a similar motion, but simply ask for certain decision points up to the, I will withdraw my motion and make a new motion. Well, I would like to amend my motion, and my seconder would have to agree. So my amended motion will be that we direct the CEO to come back to us with a scenario where we have a number of levels of increase in the assessment rate, the top rate being at or about $728, and inform us, though Hank has already done so, how we would spend that money.
And is there a second for that motion?
Sure, I like the other one better, but I'll second that.
All right, now let's discuss.
Did I cover your concern, Bob?
Yes. Yeah, if we're leading to the single conclusion that the assessment had to be 728, yes. Here we're looking at a range of possibilities, given the constraints that Hank has mentioned.
Yes.
Okay, and did I not hear Hank already say the two things I would intend to come back on?
He told us, but he can tell us in the context of those scenarios. He can tell us again.
Okay.
Karen?
I'm just confused. How many scenarios are we asking him for?
Well, I think we have to look at the facts and make a determination as to how a range of possibilities from keeping the assessment as it is, possibly raising it to some amount greater than the assessment, and also look at any other means, including borrowing, as that may impact the overall need to increase an assessment in order to fund the capital needs this coming year and into the future.
Karen, if you want more, all I said is various, several levels, the top being 728.
Okay, Sarah?
So let's say 3 levels, and we'll let the manager, the CEO, decide what those other levels would be.
Karen, did you have a follow-on before I go to Sarah?
I did, but also based on what Bob said, we're asking for a scenario that would include financing?
It could include. It could be an alternative.
I don't think.
Okay. Is there time to do all this between
No,
now and
no,
next month
I
when we have to approve a budget?
I have advocated financing as one of the ways of dealing with our capital.
Right.
And Aaron, not all capital projects, but some capital projects, especially the bigger ones and the longer lasting ones. But that's a separate discussion.
Right, and I thought that was more focused on things we would be looking at for the 22-2023 biennial budget. Now Sarah's turn.
But so what we're looking at primarily, what fiscal asked us to look at primarily, is the impending big increase in our rent. So that's what I'm focusing on, even though I'm very strong on the financing some of our capital projects.
Okay, John. Sarah.
Hank, I think, has an answer. I'd like to let Hank go before me.
All right. I didn't see Hank's hand. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm backlit. What I think I would suggest, if I think this is what you're asking, we can look out. We know what our lease costs are going to be over the next 5 years, so we can look out at that. We also can, we know what our capital costs are for the immediate coming year that we're proposing. And while we will not have all the details of the other major capital items coming up over the next 4 to 5 years, we certainly can put some sort of weighted number in there to take a look at that and see if we can't get something that we can look out 5 years and then say, okay, this is what we think we're going to have to do. And this is what we're recommending you do, or we do in 2021. I believe we can do that. So if that fits what you're describing, John, because I think the issue is this: we know we got lease expense that we know what it's going to be. We can calculate it. I basically can project what staffing expense is going to be over the next 5 years, essentially. And then we also know from our study what our capital items are going to be over the next 5 years. We just don't know all the ins and outs, but we could put a multiplier in there and say, add 30 or 40% to it. And at least will give us a number and give us some projections of what the assessments may have to be over the next 5 years. Would that be helpful, what I just described?
It would be, but is that covered in the new motion that I made?
You were asking me to give a couple of scenarios, and that's what was going through my mind when you said a couple of scenarios. I'm not in a month's time going to have
several levels. So 2 or 3 levels of assessment rates, and how the top one I would like to be 728, because that's what fiscal said.
Right.
And so you choose the intervening levels, and then indicate to us what you would propose to do with the additional revenues from those levels.
Got it.
Okay, so now Sarah.
And Hank, that's exactly what I was going to ask for or say. What is the 5-year impact or
Right.
long-term? So Hank, you're spot on. I think that'd be great if you can give that. And we haven't heard from the man who proposed this increase. If Dave, any thoughts?
Excuse me, Sarah. I believe Mike Collins had you're good?
Sorry. Go ahead.
And Bob? Or shall I see? Are you
Go to Dave and then I'll pick up if.
okay?
Thank you.
I have to speak after being called the person who's raising assessments for all the members.
No, you don't get to vote on that.
Hope you're not coming out for a vote in April. Now let me be, really honest on this, okay? This is not a financial issue right now. And what I mean by that, the rate for 21 is, what does the board have an appetite for to pass on to members when they understand the issues that are going to be around the biennial budget of 22 and 23. And so what we tried to lay out was the fact that, we're afraid that it could go up, $800, over $800 in a year. And that we ought to do something now to soften that, okay? Personally, take the money and put it in cash. Members may not want to hear that, okay? But it isn't a question of what am I going to invest it in, or what am I going to work on, or what project am I going to develop to spend it on, okay? It's a question of what appetite do we have to pass on to our members. I don't know if it's 708, 718, 728. If I was giving a pure financial answer, the number's like 770, okay? Because that way you can cover your salaries and your lease. But of course, that's not going to fly, okay? So I think the discussion is for the board on what's your appetite. And, Hank's got the makings of a 21 budget that can be molded in to fit any number you want, any number you're comfortable with, okay? And to make use of that the best way going forward. But certainly if there's any way we can help Hank or work with Hank on 3 or 4 scenarios or anything else, we'd be glad to do. But this really is a board decision on appetite.
Okay.
Dave, do you think the timing is realistic? Sorry, Joy, follow-up question.
For doing what, a few scenarios?
Yeah.
Like,
Or what
oh
we're
gosh,
asking.
sure. Yep. I'm not sure, 5 years to me would be a little harder, but 3 or 4 scenarios or 5 scenarios for 21, easy.
And those are assessment scenarios. Those are not new budget scenarios. They're assessment scenarios.
Understand, correct.
I know that I'm saying what I understand you to mean and what I mean. And so we're not asking for new things to spend the money on.
Right.
We're asking for how much, what would these new levels cover when we have to face the dooms person in 2022 and beyond.
Right. I mean, one of the questions was, how would you spend it? I'm just kind of, my comment was to refer to that I
Yeah, I didn't mean on new things. I meant how, on what future costs would we apply those revenues to?
Right. Yep.
Okay, are we ready to call the question then? Are we good with that? So
Do we have a second for the new motion?
Yes. Yeah, I second it.
Mike had seconded, or we wouldn't have been discussing it. So I'm sorry, he's just being terrible tonight.
We can hear you.
Yeah, good. You can hear him, but not me. So
Yeah.
I'd like to
He runs a better meeting. He runs a better meeting than you do, Julie. Sorry.
then you probably agree. So all in favor, please raise your hands.
Aye, Clement.
Okay, I believe it passed. I don't see any no's. Right?
Did you vote?
Oh, I voted yes. Sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, I did vote yes. All right. Then, Sarah, you had a comment?
I had my motion that was supposed to be a second motion, I think.
New motion.
Yes, and Tony, you remember what I was making the motion about?
You were wanted to waive the $25 payment fees for, I think is what I understood, waive the $25 fee if someone is late.
Or assess the financial impact of waiving it, I think, Sarah, wasn't it? Did you move to waive it or to assess the impact of waiving it?
Assess the impact of waiving it, and if we don't have a monthly, to consider a monthly payment option.
Yeah.
We have a second.
I have a question. When you say a monthly payment option, is that for that $25 service fee for the assessment for someone that wants to go on a payment plan, or is that is something else?
So what do we have right now? We have a quarterly with a $25 fee. Is that right?
Sarah, this is Larry. It's a 6-month installment plan. And it's a $25 fee to enter into that installment plan.
Yes, please. So if we can waive that $25 fee and explore a 12-month option. And it could be just for next year.
Could we, just to help with this, could we first explain what that fee covers and then what it would look like if we waived it? Because now you're taking money away. And there are costs associated with this.
At the moment, I don't recall I had a second to Sarah's motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, John, thank you. Now we can discuss. Go forth. Thank you.
No, all I was going to say is if you don't mind, we certainly would look at what it would look like to waive it, but I also would want to put in there, what's that fee covering? It's not a penalty. There's expenses associated with doing the sort of extra work that we have to do. So you're now talking about taking away revenue or making it, adding costs without revenue to cover it. So we'll include that in the assessment.
I believe there's also, you're going to look at the impact because it does change the revenue flow, potentially could change the revenue flow that we have now, which is pretty much front loaded in our year. And that might affect some interest that we would, get from having the monies in funds that we weren't quite ready to spend it yet. If I remember correctly, we have more expenses in the middle part of the year than we do when we first get the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be the overall impact, not just the cost of what the $25 covers.
Right.
Any more discussion on Sarah's motion to have staff investigate the impact and ability to waive the $25? Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor of that assessment, that review? I see John, Bob, Mike, Tom, Sarah, Aaron, Karen.
Ben says aye.
Ben says aye. Karen, nay.
I'm a nay.
Nay. And so I think we've got everyone but me, right? So I say yes.
8-1.
Okay. Thank you. Are we finished with the budget discussion? Do we feel we have enough so that on November 4th, we'll be reviewing draft number 3 as it currently exists, with the addition of the door openers? And I don't believe we have asked staff to do any other changes for the November 4th budget hearing. We have asked staff to do some analysis to be ready for us, our consideration, both for fiscal on the 18th and the full board on the 19th as we set the 2021 budget and assessment level.
I'm sorry, but
You just went on mute, Mike.
there we go. Sorry about that. I missed that difference in the dates. Are we talking about presenting the budget to the public on the 4th?
Yes.
But then on the 17th, we might have a different number. We might be shooting to 728. I'm surprised we would take it in that order.
Well, we have to have a public hearing
Right.
before we vote on the budget.
Sure.
A budget is scheduled to be voted on in November's 19th meeting.
Right.
And
But the hearing would be before we have this analysis about what do we do with another $20. John, you're shaking your head. What am I missing?
So the assessment question is really about getting more money for future beyond the 2021 budget. So we can still have the meeting on the 2021 budget, but we're looking at assessments, ramping up assessments for future costs beyond 2021.
right, I don't think there were any changes.
But in that public hearing, we'd be telling people we're building a budget based on 708, but then 2 weeks later, we're going to have a different conversation about charging them more money.
My understanding is that public hearing is both on the budget and on the proposed assessment. And so they would hear both at the same time.
Well, but they'd only hear the 708 at the hearing because we won't have the other numbers.
We won't have the other numbers, but we can certainly share that we have asked for a analysis, a scenario breakdown. Obviously with the caveat that any increase in assessment would not change the current plan on our operations.
Oh, I understand. We're not proposing changes in the spending, but we are proposing changes in the dollars and cents that and I'm just not sure why we go forward with a public meeting without actually deciding on a number or being close to a number. If I'm off base, then shut me up, and I already voted for it, so it's okay. Does anyone else have a problem with that?
Hank can talk to it, but I would see, Mike, that Hank would present at that meeting when it came to talk about assessments, that we are looking, and I think between now and November 4th, he can come up with the 3 levels, and that we are looking at these 3 levels of assessment with a view to ramping up to deal with costs beyond 2021, something like that. Does that make sense? Is that true, Hank?
That's the question.
That you could do that?
Yeah, we will, yes, we will put a very short slideshow together. It won't be like I just did for you all. You had the material ahead of time, and so I hit the highlights. We would talk about what's in the 2021 budget, what the current assessment is covering, but here's the additional challenge as a community we're facing, and this is why the board is struggling with or has the decision to make on what the assessment is actually going to be. But any extra that comes with that assessment is going to be to deal with the lease, deal with capital, essentially. And that's how we'll do it.
Okay.
If you look at, I'm sorry for butting in, but if you look at the impact of a $20 increase in the assessment, that is going to basically cover the additional, the incremental cost of the lease in 2021.
Oh, I understand. It's just that I want to just make sure that at that meeting, we're telling the public, we built this budget on 708, but we're really thinking that it might be higher. And that's what a hearing like that has to do. It has to give people notice of what might
absolutely,
be coming down the
yeah.
pipe.
You can't.
And it sounds to me like, Hank, you can do that. Even though we asked for this analysis at our next full board meeting, you'll be able to have, if not all of it, most of it done for the public on the 4th. Is that right?
Yeah, we can get a lot of this done. And
thank you.
I saw Karen, and I'm sorry, not taking over the meeting. Karen and Larry wants to say something.
Karen wanted to say something. Larry raising his hand.
Is it me?
Yes, go Karen, and then Larry.
Very briefly, I mean, as I'm sitting here thinking about this, and I had the same questions in my head that you did, Mike, but if we can present this at the hearing on the 4th, I mean, it could be really helpful to us to get a read from at least those people who care enough to join that call. What kind of reaction are we going to get from members? No, that's it.
Larry?
No, I was going to say, Mike, you're spot on in your call there on the notice. You may recall a lot of times county, state, even utilities, when they advertise a public hearing, they advertise a range of a rate of possibility, and then they give the reasons for such. And so I think, and this is Mike Leone's on the call here, I think when we put it that notice, we say the board is considering a range of 708. We'll just use the numbers that have been talked about tonight, 708 to 728 for these various reasons, so that people understand why they're coming, why they want to listen, and hopefully they'll understand once they hear the explanation, and then ultimately the board gets the feedback and makes the decision.
Right.
Larry, this is Mike. Just so you know, the notice for that public hearing has already been out. It's been out for almost 2 weeks, and we've got 2 ads that are going in Connections newspaper. So basically, it's a generic statement that says, comment on the 2021 capital and operating budgets. It does not speak to assessments per se. But at this point, there's no time to change those. Those ads are done and they're out.
But could we advertise in RA News and through press release and get Reston Now and others to pick it up, that notion at least. So at least, as Mike said, there's more information out there in advance.
And Mike, I recall having an exchange with you that we were only providing a certain level of information out prior to this meeting, and we would have the opportunity to be a bit more specific after tonight's meeting in what, as Larry said, we put in our packet, in our information on the website about the meeting. So I still think there's time to craft a bit more of a message to our.
Okay, yeah, yeah, I just wanted everybody to understand that there is already some meeting notices out there on the hearing.
We haven't done a quote unquote agenda, if you will, and
Correct.
who the speakers are and everything. So we do have a chance to be more comprehensive about what's going to happen on the 4th. So
Okay, well, I'm happy with what
okay.
everyone said. Sorry, I had a
So
senior moment there. Thank you.
I'd like to wrap up our budget discussion for the evening, if we might, and move to John Mooney. You had a few things you wanted to share in the comprehensive plan.
It is the briefest of summaries. So as members know who have been following this, we are engaged in a review and revision of the Reston Comprehensive Plan. There is a task force appointed by Supervisor Alcorn, and we've been meeting for a number of months now. It's been delayed because Walter had to take some time off. So we're trying to pick up steam again. We have delayed the next meeting until November the 9th, starting at 7 p.m. And what we're going to do, working on in between a number of us with Walter, we're trying to come up with a system for getting smaller work groups to work on what are called the task areas, the focus areas, like transportation, like population, like monitoring development and the impacts of development and so forth. So we're going to try to become more efficient by working in small groups. And that's really what we discussed last time. Again, the next meeting is November 9th, starting at 7 p.m.
And those subgroups, they're still of the same members that are on the task.
Members of the task force. Members of the task force. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, it's members of the task force. Larry, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, good coverage, John. Yeah, but we're pretty excited about working in the small groups though, because I think we'll get a lot more traction that way.
All right. The next item on our agenda was really just a discussion. No specific actions to be taken from that, but rather just a conversation amongst us all. I would entertain a motion to defer that discussion to a follow-on meeting, because I frankly think that we have done quite a lot of work tonight in sharing and discussing things. I'm happy to keep talking.
So moved.
But if you all would accept that motion to defer item K to a follow meeting, whether it's November or December, we'll try it for November. So moved from John and a second from Karen.
Second, I was going to make that motion myself.
Okay. All in favor of deferring item K?
Aye.
I think that all passes. I think that's an aye from everybody, including Ben. The next motion that I would like to make is I do not believe we have anything to discuss in consultation with council tonight either. So we could make a motion to remove that from our agenda tonight. I think I saw Sarah saying a so moved. I think that's what she said.
Second.
John Mooney.
Yes.
All in favor of removal of the executive session? Ben, are you?
Aye from Ben.
And an aye from Mike Collins, I'm sure.
I'm deeply hurt.
You don't get to vote, Mr. Champ. So, any new business? Mr. Petrine.
Did Ben have, I think Ben got in before me. Is there anything that he wanted to bring up?
Ben?
No, thank you. I don't have anything.
I had one issue. The county over the past 3 years has begun to, well, has done an incredible amount of work to modernize the ordinance, the zoning ordinance in Fairfax County. It has been done through a process called ZMOD. And I would like to make a motion to direct our general counsel to do a review of ZMOD as it may impact Reston Association and the Reston citizens.
I would
It
second.
is a 700 plus page
Right.
document.
Second.
Yeah, I was going to say I would second that as well, but we'll let Mr. Mooney take it. I know that that's something that staff has already begun to look at, Bob, so very much support formalizing that review. Any discussion on it?
I will only say it's really important because Reston Association with its planned residential community ordinance has such a unique zoning ordinance that the simplification done in ZMOD could remove some of the protections in the PRC ordinance. So we need to make very sure before it's adopted that it does not harm us in that way.
Correct.
Agreed.
Right. Anyone further discussion, or can we take a vote? All in favor of the motion from Bob? So I see everyone.
Aye from Ben.
Aye from Ben. And is Mike Collins still on? Aye. Shalice, did Mike?
He left out.
Okay, I thought he had just left. Okay, so 8 in favor, passes. No more new business. Anyone wish to make the next motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And it.
Aye. Who won, Larry and Tony? Who won?
Thank you all.
21.
Thank you. Bye.
I lost by 7 minutes.
I tried, Larry. I tried. Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
You-